Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 303. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, Dr. Norge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the Whatnot Segment, and the Duke of You Know. This episode is going to be our last part of our big Nightfall exploration. We've been doing this since episode 300. We wanted to do something big for our show's anniversary. We've been doing a lot of the New 52 discussion, and just because of the amount of new material coming out from DC, we haven't had a chance to do some of the classic material. And this is something that really we needed to save for a special anniversary because of, obviously, look how many episodes it's taken and how big of an undertaking this has been. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this as a special kind of side story, a special side episode series of Raging Bullets for our anniversary. Next week, we're going to be jumping back to the New 52. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts.
Do you want to rock and roll all night? What about party every day? Well, IDW has you covered with Kiss #1, written by Chris Ryall and art by friend of the show, Jamal Igle. I got a chance to talk to Jamal at C2E2 about this book, and man, does it sound like it's going to be really fun. 1920 Chicago. 4 ordinary humans are transformed into Kiss and find themselves caught up in a battle of epic proportions that will reverberate across time and space. Plus, with Jamal's art, you know it's going to look good. And if that wasn't enough, our friends at DCBS has you covered, and they're taking care of you with a special 50% off discount. That's right, regular price, $3.99. Yours, $1.99. Check it out. It should be a really rockin' time. And, wow, have a good day.
Oh, James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on this show. So, if you haven't read the books, you may want to think about coming back later after you have. That way, you can better enjoy the show.
Let's talk some comics.
Through the magic alchemy of nature's most awesome sources of energy, Ray Palmer, atomic physicist, becomes the atom.
Jim, this is it. This is the coup de grace. We're going to be talking about Knightsend. This was my favorite part of the whole thing. You can't have this part without having everything that came before, but for a Bruce fan, like I obviously am, this whole running the gauntlet of him, reclaiming the mantle, the way that they presented it in this long-form 10-issue, well, 11, considering there's the Aftermath issue in this, but in a 10-issue story arc, really encompassing the whole Bat family and bringing everything together was, for me, just an absolute treat. It culminated a lot of what has been going on with Bruce, but left more questions, left more storyline. That's one of the things that I really love about comics, that yes, you get an ending to a story, but there's so much in that ending that develops further storytelling. Reading this again, it had every moment, every right beat for me that it had at the time. It held up very well. You're in a different place than I am, though, in the sense that this was your first time reading any of this part. Am I right?
Yeah. If I read it, I do not remember reading it. Yeah, I knew some of the stuff would happen through discussion, but I had no recollection of reading this stuff at all. So I'm thinking I didn't actually get to it, or I'm not sure. This could have come out when either at the end of college or when I wasn't up at school, so I wouldn't have seen my one buddy, and I wouldn't have gotten the issues, and because I wasn't reading Batman.
The beats with Lady Shiva and everything that they did in this part of the story arc, Bruce related, makes this storyline. This is one on my top 5 list. This part is on my top 5 list of favorite Batman stories of all time. How did it hold for you, though? I don't know if you have. I don't know if you get, because I know part of that's going to be nostalgia for me. But I really loved reading this again.
I
kind of want to jump through the microphone and hit you with a shoe right now, because I knew I was setting myself up for it.
Come on,
no. I mean,
you gave me a golden opportunity there. I had to take it.
Right.
But, no, seriously, I can see what you're saying with being one of the top 5. This was an absolute wonderful Bruce story because it really showed why he's Batman, why he's able to do what he does. This was anybody at the level he was at going into the Shiva Gauntlet, Anybody else would have said, "Oh, this is good enough. Yeah, you can fight. You got your skills back. You're still able to throw down." But it wasn't enough for him. It had to go beyond what a normal person would consider ready. And even had to go beyond what a crazy person would consider ready. He had to go to the Batman level of preparation. He had to go to that existence that is beyond what any normal person, any regular human being would think. Oh yeah, okay, this is it. And that's part of the coolness behind what is Batman. He is this everyday normal person. So in the back of your mind, you're thinking, yeah, if I trained, I could maybe do some of this stuff. And you start seeing this type of training, and you're like, okay, yeah, there's no way I would ever commit to that level of, have that level of commitment to this.
And he did it again.
Yeah, repeatedly and just over and over again. And you just like, I was funny because as he was going through the gauntlet, I'm sitting there saying, okay, are you ready yet? And he's in his inner dialogue saying, not ready yet. Should have detected him sooner. Should have done this faster. And I'm like, what the heck, dude? And it kind of gives you a nice insight into Batman and why he's able to throw down with some meta level powered villains. It's not just the Bat utility belt and the gadgets and the toys. It is the man who's yielding these weapons.
Well, and we're going to deliberately have to talk about that because there was so many sequences in this where the utility belt was useless.
Yeah,
and it wasn't or it wasn't present. So we'll have to talk about that. I'll share specifics as far as why this storyline holds such a fondness for me as we get to it. I think before we jump into it, though, we might want to talk a little bit about the events that led up to this. Jean-Paul had been Batman at this time in the main Batman titles. Bruce was showing up in like Legends of the Dark Knight. He was showing up in Shadow of the Bat, and he was also showing up in Justice League Task Force in a storyline called Knight's Quest: The Search. That was him searching for Jack Drake. That was him searching for Chandra Kinsolving, really resolving like why he was falling in love with her. And we found out that this was a woman who was adopted when she was very young by a racist who was abusing her. And having a brother who was also, I believe he was also adopted. I don't remember if he was. I'm thinking he was as well. But the two of them bonding over the fact that she had this special power and he had a special power to a certain extent with healing. The two of them had this like idea of being healers and helping others because with their powers and things. But because of the abuse that they were receiving, they end up killing their dad. Or stepdad, or actually adoptive father, foster father, whatever you want to call it. No, he adopted them, though, so it was their adopted dad. Because of just the sheer amount of abuse that was happening, to the point where it could have killed them both. Now, she crafted this whole new life for herself as, not as a healer using her powers, but as becoming a doctor, and really trying to better people's lives. When they're kidnapped, Bruce thought it was Bane that was kidnapping them. It was not Bane. It was the brother trying to get her and to use her to craft this killing machine type weapon using her powers. He was drugging her to the point where she was losing grasp of reality and sense of identity. But you can see how Bruce would have a feeling of a kindred spirit with this woman because her life, to a certain extent, had a similar background to Bruce's.
Yeah.
She was this woman who lost her parents when she was very young, had a tragic event that drastically altered her purpose in life and made her try to become some form of agent of change in her case in the healing end. So you can see why Bruce would have traction to this. But in that storyline, throughout that journey, as Bruce was finding out more of her secrets along the way, he started questioning if he loved her because of that. And so I'm going to go very quickly over that because I do think it's a storyline that's going to be crafted. It's going to be traded, and you're going to have a chance to be able to read this one because I think it is going to be what this new second trade that's coming out is going to be. But it's a deep storyline where Bruce has to find out the truth along the way about her. He's realizing that he's in love with her, and part of this love, because you address this, like how did he fall in love with her so quick and what's going on with that, part of this love is we've got this Bruce Wayne who he's unsatisfied with being Bruce Wayne anymore. He doesn't know who Bruce Wayne is. I think having the masks on, devoting his life to being Batman, has gotten him to the point where he doesn't remember his purpose anymore, doesn't know his purpose anymore. And part of this storyline with Knightsend, where it ends, is we're seeing a Bruce, even at the end of this one, who isn't really 100% sure the direction that Batman's going in. And this is a journey that Knight's End doesn't completely close off. It sets him in a place where now he can begin discovering who he is again. He's in a positive place where he feels confident with, I need to change my life. I need to, whereas before it was, my life is overwhelming me so much that it's put me in a place where some guy can break my back. So we're in a very different place with him. On the flip side of things, we've also got some main characters like Jean-Paul. Oh, wait, I should add one more thing. Chandra is the major factor in Bruce's being able to walk again. Bruce started being able to walk again prior to what Chandra does, but his injuries were, when I say walk again, he needed canes to be able to move around.
Right.
It wasn't he was able to walk without them. He needed assisted devices in order to do it, and he was going to be stuck with that for life. Chandra's her abilities were what set him over and made him able to walk again. And that's really a storyline you need to read in its entirety, because I'm going through something very fast that happened over at least 9 issues of comic storytelling.
Okay, cool.
So, a very, very deep storyline. And it leads to, though, Alfred jumping ship. Because Alfred can't watch his mentor, or his son, sort of pseudo-son, pushing himself to the point where he is going to be permanently paralyzed, going to die, going to any number of things. You know, he's gone too far. After everything Bane did to him, to continue to push himself, even against Alfred's recommendations, acting like he's still Batman when he can't be Batman, if that makes sense, was enough for Alfred to say, you've either got to choose me, you know, you want me with you, or if you're going to keep heading down this path, I can't be here for you anymore. And this actually took Alfred out of the Batman books for a very long stretch.
Dang,
so,
that's...
And he didn't come back until right before Nightwing's series. So it was an interesting journey for Alfred. So we had a lot of comic storytelling coming out of this where Alfred was not with Bruce.
Did they ever show what Alfred was doing?
Yes, like a mini-series type storytelling that showed a little bit of what Alfred's life was like. And then there was a one-shot, a Nightwing one-shot, Nightwing Alfred's Return, that showed him encountering Nightwing for the first time and bringing Alfred back into the Bat family of titles.
Cool.
So it was an interesting journey for Alfred back to then. So this storyline has huge ramifications. Jim Gordon is going through, we've got Jean-Paul Valley being a Batman that is getting darker and darker, more and more like the Punisher. There's no other way to say it. And I love the Punisher. So anytime, when I bring up the Punisher and I'm using it as a negative to reference Jean-Paul Valley's style of being Batman, it's not that I don't like the Punisher. I'm a big fan of the Punisher. I actually love the Punisher back to the original miniseries Marvel did. But the Punisher's not Batman. There are huge distinctions between these two characters as far as their way of operating, their moral code. And I mean, it's one of the things that's cool about reading the Punisher. The Punisher's the Punisher. We get to see a Batman that's becoming the Punisher and what that relationship is doing positive for his relationship with the mayor. And in many ways, Bullock is liking some of what he's doing. But on the Gordon end, Gordon is growing more and more distant from this style of Batman and questioning what is going on. Why is Batman behaving this way? Is this the same guy? Or, have I been fooled all along?
Well, that was something that, when I was reading this, seeing Jean in the level he was at when this hits, kind of, it threw me a bit. Because in the earlier stuff, I took it as just the more aggressive Batman, and just there was the system, but I didn't take it beyond to, he seems almost full on 100% crazy when we get to this section. Mm-hmm. And that was something it took me a little bit to get comfortable with, just because I would have liked to have seen a more Punisher where he's not crazy. He just has a different modus. He just has a different way of operating than Bruce did. This Batman, this version of him, he seemed kind of crazy, and that was it was an explanation why he was so different than Bruce.
He was being tormented by the system, by visions that he started to receive, and you see that in this. But that was gradual over time. I think some of that was also his own subconscious coming to a head, recognizing that what he's doing and the path he's on might not be the right path. I think there's elements of that as well. going on in this story, where he's going gradually. And I think by the end of this, it's really, really clear Jean-Paul Valley does not know who he is. He's adopted this Batman persona. He becomes the Batman. That becomes his identity. I don't think he fully knows who that character is. And if you don't know who that character is and you're putting on this mask and letting this mask drive and dictate you, you've never really developed your own sense of a moral code and what's right and wrong and how do you feel about those things. Because he never really addresses any of that. How does he feel? He lets Abatar die, which is a villain. And not only did he let him die, Abatar had a villain Abatar had a victim who was in this death trap that because he let this villain die, he didn't know where the victim was in enough time to save the victim. So the victim dies like this horrible death, which is even worse than letting the villain die. You know, if that makes sense. You let an innocent totally die because of it. So that was the huge line that he crossed. It wasn't just the turning a blind eye to the death of a villain, letting this villain die this horrible death. Forget that. He also let an innocent die. If he had stayed out of it and the police had handled it, maybe the innocent would have lived. Maybe. You know, who's to say what would have happened? Bottom line is his presence there did not accomplish anything positive other than that Abatar's not there anymore. And is that really, who knows if that's really a positive? He wasn't really brought to justice. That was a line that Batman never crossed. He didn't, you know, it wasn't ever a permanent finishing of a villain. It was always turning them over to the police, putting them in Arkham, or, you know, letting them handle those things. That was the, like, code, the relationship between the two. There was a line that let Batman continue operating in Gotham. Jean-Paul crossed that line. During all this, Tim can't reveal that to Bruce, like what's been going on. Because, first of all, Bruce is going after his dad. He does reveal some of it to Alfred later, very, very late, when this happened. So it's right before this storyline that we're seeing right now. It was revealed to Alfred. Alfred wasn't able to tell Bruce at this time because of how driven Bruce was towards saving Chandra.
Yeah.
And, you know, Alfred's asking Tim, you know, do you need us to come back and all that? And you know, Tim's basically in a position where he can't finish that. He can't get that going because of everything that's going on with Bruce and Alfred at the time. So that was the setup for where things went. So then Bruce comes back home. The situation with Chandra was all, and I'm not going to say how that was resolved, but it was resolved in such a way that Bruce will never be with Chandra. And I'll leave that open-ended. I know I revealed a lot of beats from that storyline, but there's so much more depth to it than what I've revealed there. Let's just say that it's a tragic ending to a love story. But Bruce comes back out of that in a very good place in the sense that he, or at least as good as it can get for Bruce, he's looking at, maybe I can retire now. Maybe I can just learn who Bruce Wayne is, and maybe that's the life I need to rebuild. I need to learn who Bruce Wayne is and live a normal life, and maybe this is my direction to go in now, because Bruce is looking for a direction still. When he comes back and finds out from Tim everything, including the fact that now the mantle of the Bat has been horribly tainted. This is not what Bruce is expecting coming back. He's thinking he has spent years of his life devoting himself to making Batman, picked a successor who is succeeding. He's able to do the things that, because he hasn't heard it otherwise.
Right.
So he comes back and Tim's got to say, well, guess what? And I've been blocked out of the cave. You know, my entrance has been like bricked up. There's no way to get in there. Everything's booby trapped. You know, this is a very dangerous place that I'm coming into. The two of them have to have a confrontation with Jean-Paul where Bruce is now walking again. Bruce is a healthy, normal person. But he hasn't trained in this time away, retrained his muscle memory and everything. So Jean-Paul, like, throws him like a rag doll off to the side when Bruce basically is trying to eject him from the cave. Yeah. And says, I'm the Batman now. You were nothing but a man wearing a mask. I am the Batman. And Bruce has to make a tough decision and say, I've got to figure out how I'm going to resolve this, because this can't stand. And that leads him to where we are in Batman 509, where we're kicking off with in this. Is there anything from that like you have questions on? I'm trying to give like a Cliff's Notes version of this, and really I encourage people to read these storylines leading up to this because there's a lot more depth to everything I've just said. We're not really covering it, and the trade for that is coming out in May, so I do recommend for anybody to pick up that trade. But Jim, is there anything from that you have like burning questions on as far as, I think I've given enough?
No, I'm good. To
give kind of an overhead as far as what happened from A to B, and maybe along the way organically there'll be things that come up question-wise that we can kind of talk about. But obviously from my comments, I reread the stuff leading up to all this in preparation for this, because just figuring that if we're going to do something comprehensive like this, it'd be fun to casually let people know what they missed and why they should seek it out. So Knightsend Part 1, Spirit of the Bat. This for me, when you see Lady Shiva here, and you get to see this kickoff of her attacking this master. He's this master who has like the 7 masters who were once his pupils. She goes and fights this person. We're not realizing this guy has no arms. Yet he is a master who's trained these other 7 masters, and Shiva's taking him out mercilessly. Wow. Go ahead.
That was a shocker and a surprise, just with the whole unarmed combat, and then you just see that the Stubbs, and he's just using his legs, and I was kind of like, it was one of those moments where you get taken back, but then you kind of get into the whole moment, and you're like, yeah. And I love the fact that his assessment of Shiva, where she's, it's the scent of sweet jasmine, but the eyes of a cold eyes of a killer. She's a vampire, just who hungers blood, and I just love just how it was a kind of that whole. 2 masters meet each other, and they know each other, front and back, just, boom, right from the get-go. It was a really cool kind of moment as they're facing off, and I knew from the very beginning, just because, the layout, I knew Shiva was going to just destroy this guy, but I didn't think to the level that she did. It was beyond, it wasn't even a close fight. I don't think he landed any actual solid kicks or punches, didn't land any punches, but any solid kicks or anything. This was a complete Shiva battle.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I really liked about that, because it set up a certain feeling for her ruthlessness, what her motivations might be in training Bruce. That there would be an avenue for him that's a very dangerous line that she wants him to skirt and cross. And it's something we do see in play right now in current issues of Batman and Robin. That debate over his own code, and how that code might not be the right way for Gotham, and that code, it's something that he constantly has to deal with when he deals with masters who are assassins and, your ruthless fighters and killers and things like that. Bruce has to learn how to train to counter these people, defeat these people without crossing the lines that they do, to become something more and something better without having to kill as the crutch, so to speak. I think it does make him even more of a master than they are, because he has to find ways to subdue these ruthless people who could end his life permanently if he makes one small mistake. So I love these bits and these beats. You alluded to this earlier when you were talking about Bruce's internal dialogue throughout this. For me, this was a total geek out, because I don't remember reading many stories with Batman growing up where it was this close of a focus for this many issues on what it was like to become the man, his own self-doubts, his own worries, I felt like we were traveling with him so totally throughout this. And I was geeking out at the time over it, because I'm not saying we haven't had stories like that before this. Sure there were. But at the time, we had a Batman for so long that has pushed people away and been so on this dark place, and kept Robin off the scene and things like that we're having one right now we can kind of embrace and ride along with. I loved that aspect of this. And Shiva we had seen previously in the Robin books, probably most recently in Batman storytelling in the Robin books as far as part of his training.
Yeah. Well, that was something I was wondering with Shiva. When did she first come into the Bat universe? Has she been around for a while, or?
My exposure to vivid memories of her in the Bat universe were in the Robin series as a trainer there. I'm not saying those were her first. I've read so much Batman over the years that first appearances of certain characters and things like that are really hard for me to trace back. I got to admit, I didn't look this up for an answer. I'm giving this off the top of my head right now. So this is just gut off of what my memory was. Those Robin minis where we were seeing Tim being trained, where we got to see Shiva there, and I haven't read those in years, but I remember vividly her appearances there, which predate this. because obviously Robin's in his own solo series now at this point. That was my vivid memory of Shiva being a part of the Bat universe. I'm not saying that's the only time. I'm sure she had other appearances, but I think because she was a trainer to Robin, that's why it stands out for me more.
Okay.
So I don't have a better answer for you than that, other than that's my personal vivid memory. Any of our listeners, please call in or email us or shoot something up on Facebook if you remember when she first came in, because I don't. So I'm not pretending that I do. That's my first vivid memory of her because of her focus with Robin. I'm guessing, though, she probably had previous appearances other than that, just because of the fact that Bruce went to her as a trainer.
Yeah, Bruce was comfortable. Well, that was another. I was going to say he was comfortable going to her. He wasn't comfortable, but he knew he was at he was at a desperate level where he needed her level of skill to get back to where he was. And I like the fact that, he's sitting there saying, hey, thinking, this is a killer. This is somebody I shouldn't really be going to, but I have no choice. I have to get back to where I was and who I am. I have to reaccomplish that. And I really like the fact that he's recognizing the line. And then even as the training, it goes to another level that I don't think he was even expecting when Shiva goes and kills the master and gets all the other masters after him. Because now he has these incredibly trained, these masters of the various martial arts coming after him who want to kill him, and he cannot, and he doesn't take the life. So it even took it to another level. I think that even Bruce wasn't prepared or didn't think it would go to.
One of the things I liked about it was this, and I don't remember this, everything that we saw in this issue with them training by themselves before even, her little twist of saying, wait, I've got a better idea, many ways to come after you and all that, many, many weeks were devoted to that. So 2 weeks into it, they're in like panel number 4 of that fighting page. So this training happening over many, many weeks and this gauntlet that they were running is not something that was contained in a matter of a couple of days. But yet for him, this has to be the Batman Express. He has to get back to being Batman as soon as possible because the longer he's away, the more Jean-Paul is destroying his legacy. The more Jean-Paul is destroying Batman and taking Gotham in a direction that he never intended. It becomes a big sense of responsibility that he's devoting to this with reclaiming the mantle. The problem with this is, and one of the things I really love about this storyline is all this devotion to taking down Jean-Paul has not gotten rid, and this is where the storyline I think gets really smart and where the writers and the editors and everyone involved at this time in the direction of the Bat books is really smart, is you're doing all this. You're still not dealing with the fact that Bruce has to develop his sense of direction beyond this afterwards. Okay, He reclaims the mantle, but then what? You still have the problem that he had that predated Knightfall. You've set up this whole situation, and at the end of this, he's going to have to deal with all that next. And I love that, how big all this was. And I think during this journey that we're seeing with Shiva, one of the reasons why it's one of the stories I'm very, very fond of, he feels like a real person in this. And I'm always, Bruce Wayne has been, since I was a little kid, my buddy. One of those characters that, I just really love. And I think everyone has those characters they've grown up with. For a lot of people listening, it is Batman. For other people, it might be Spider-Man, it might be Superman, it might be whatever. I mean, whatever your characters are, you have more than one. For me, it was always Batman. And to have these moments where these guys feeling alive and he still feels strong while, like I said, having these weaknesses and things, there was something multifaceted about him, multi-layered about him that we don't always get to see him stripped away. It's always like he's in one mode. He's either in like really strong Batman mode or we see something dark happening to him and we don't get to see all of it. All of his layers were revealed in this storyline and I really ate that up. I think this is one of those rare times where we get to see the real Bruce Wayne. Like, this is the real guy. There is no mask here in these moments when he's fighting Shiva. This is the fella. And we rarely get to hang with this guy.
And Batman's like an onion.
Yeah.
He's got layers.
Except usually, actually the onion analogy really fits there because onions usually have that shell over the outside of it. And with Bruce, we usually have always got that shell. We never get as deep enough to start peeling these layers away. But I really loved this storyline because of that. Shiva with that little spark where she's ready to let him go because he won't kill.
Yeah.
And yet she won't take him down because he's not a worthy enough adversary. In that moment where she comes up with that, I loved when she gave him the mask. And see, here's the funny part. I've always referenced that I love this storyline, and even more when I've read it now, it just dawned on me how much. I didn't remember the twist of, by giving him that mask, he's now assumed the identity of being the one that killed the sensei.
Right.
Like, and I knew that was the premise. I knew that he was running the gauntlet. I didn't remember that. I thought she sent him after those masters. I didn't remember that it was this that set him up to be the unwilling victim of identity crisis.
Oh, yeah, that, you know what? And again, it was a great training technique. I wouldn't personally ever want it done to me. I would have been like, hey, I wasn't the guy that killed your master. That was Shiva. I'm just a guy who's trying to learn how to fight here. I'm just trying to get back to where I was. It's, you know, so let's just part friends and move on. That's why I couldn't be Batman. It's that, you know, whole facing those guys down, and I love the fact that he even acknowledged it with that first guy with the chain when he realizes, hey, this guy thinks I killed the master. Okay, that's going to take it to a whole nother level for me. And he sat there and he accepted this as a training technique. And as long as he wasn't going to break his code, and even when he defeats the guy, he's like, okay, I'm not going to kill him. Well, Shiva does. So he learns from that point on, okay, don't leave them defeated in Shiva's presence. Let them go back to their people. You know, once I've defeated them, they will move on, they will go back, and the next one will come after me. And I liked just seeing him shift, you know, midstream and start accepting and understanding how he's got to take this all the way up until the end when he finally figures out how it's time to end the training now. I thought that was a cool, you know, again, another cool development of Batman and how he's going. It's always shows he always thinks, he always has a plan, he always has, you know, the next step lined up.
Jean Paul at this point is dealing with, and this is why some of this I think is not just the system, it's the system kind of reacting to his own subconscious. He failed as Azrael in the eyes of what Saint Duma, you know, that whole group, the Order. The direction they had for him, he just didn't fit as their assassin. It didn't work out. So now he's Batman. He's failing as Batman. He's not better than Bruce. In many ways, I think part of him is realizing that he's a shadow of Bruce, but will not accept that because this has become his identity. He's fighting against it. He's done the right thing for Gotham by this new direction that he's going in. It's made him better and stronger and faster and all these other things. You know, he's really the $6 million Batman in this case. You know, versus how we were joking that Bruce was going to be that. But that was something in his psychological battle here. I think there is elements of that on the surface as well, that I don't think it is just the system that's doing this. But we also start to find out in the storyline some hidden things, and we can kind of talk about it really quick and then a little more heavily as we get into it. He's also got a situation now where he's becoming obsessed with the death of his father and starts to find clues that are making him think that he can track down the person who brutally murdered his dad when his dad was Azrael. So this storyline takes an interesting turn with him as well, and this adds more to his violence and brutality that we've seen previously from him.
Oh, that, yeah, seeing that, him go down that path with just the rantings to the premonition, the vision of Saint Duma, and just, you know, his obsession with Leha, I was just like, wow, that's where I really said, I was like, this guy is absolutely freaking nuts. He's over the edge, and it was to the point where I was like, is this really the system or is this him? Does he have a screw loose? Is it something they did to him? Who is the real Azrael? Who is the real Jean Paul? Is it this obsessed psychopath? Is this some guy who could have possibly been the heir to the bat? You know, I didn't know, and that's something I didn't get really a strong take out of this.
Yes. Everything you just said, yes.
Oh, okay.
And that's the problem. No, I mean, that's the problem that he's going to have to face, too. Because every question you have is the questions he's going to have to deal with. Because everything you're saying is actually what he's dealing with as well. What you're getting out of this is exactly what you should be getting out of it.
Okay. Now, did they tell his story after this?
There is an issue after this of Showcase.
Okay. And
I think it's number 10... from 9, I think it was Showcase 94, number 10, I think. And I'm trying to throw this off the top of my head. It does deal with, I'm going to look right now, Showcase 94, number 10. It's totally devoted to Azrael.
Okay.
And it's totally devoted to just the questions that you're asking right now. It doesn't answer all those questions. It further emphasizes the fact that he needs to discover those answers, which leads into him having his own series. So
Alrighty.
his series, Azrael, written by Denny O'Neil, spins out of that issue and starts to take a person who clearly doesn't have an identity and starts to try and develop one for him.
Oh, okay, cool.
So, and I think that was an interesting little twist. I don't think they realized that this character was going to develop this life beyond this, that they could actually do that with. I really quite liked following Azrael after this. By this time when Knight's End hit, I was so ready to see him beaten down severely. And I found myself, though, interested in following him not as Batman, but following him as Azrael after this. Like, I wanted to know the answers to a lot of the questions you were asking. It's because of exactly what you're saying right now. Like, that's all stuff you want to know, right?
Yeah.
So that led to a comic series.
And I tell you, it was interesting because you mentioned wanting to see him get beat down. Before I read Knight's End, I wanted to see it. I wanted to see Bruce come back and kick his butt and, just toss him around like a rag doll. But as this is going on, as I started seeing just how crazy the guy was, I started feeling bad for him. I started saying, you know what? I don't want to see him get a physical beatdown. I want to see him stopped, and I want to see Bruce back in the mantle, but I didn't want to see the beatdown. I did want, and kind of still do want to see the Bruce Bane rematch. And I want to see a fresh, refreshed Bruce Wayne versus Bane. And I want to see how that fight plays out, and I'd like to see that, that storyline. But, it was funny with Azrael being...
Jim, there's stuff when you read, you're going to have to get the trade.
Okay.
When you read Night Quest and you see some of his interactions with Tim,
yeah,
you'll see why I was ready. First of all, I'm going to agree with everything you said about how this storyline kind of sets up the crazy in a way that I thought the resolution of this, when we get to it, we'll talk about it. I thought the resolution of this was absolutely perfect. But leading into this, there are events that happen, particularly involving Tim, that you want to see this guy get his butt absolutely handed to him.
Oh, okay.
And I agree, everything you said, how there's an emotional change in how Knight's End kicks off in this, I agree with. And it actually to the point where this storyline gradually changed my feelings towards him, to the point where I was really excited when his solo series came out. And in the exact same place you're in, where you're saying, well, I want to know answers to all these questions of things I don't know about him, I was in that place too. So it is funny how I can totally sympathize with what you're saying, even having read everything that led me say I want to see him get the smackdown. I loved seeing Bruce in a ninja-style costume. There was something about that, because to me, I've always been fascinated about, I always reference that Batman Begins was, for me, my favorite movie out of that and Dark Knight. And the reason why is because we got to see Bruce trained, we got to see all those situations. And I think a lot of that is influenced by this story. I love seeing Bruce in the ninja outfit, training himself, going up against running this gauntlet of going up against the 7 warriors, and seeing how with each warrior, he's analyzing himself, recognizing what's missing, how he should have noticed certain things before they actually happened. I didn't sense him as the chains are coming at him, and couldn't meditate ahead of time to put myself in a place for this battle, because he didn't really know what was coming. That stuff was all things I ate up. There's, this whole, there's no harmony or integration. Things that he expected before. We expect Batman to be this kind of flowing motion. There's a poetry to Batman a lot of times. You'll see these wonderful scenes of him swooping down with his cape, and you'll see him swooping off to the side doing these wonderful kicks that look like, it's almost like he's a knife in the way he cuts the air. I love seeing in these moments that he's not that guy yet. He's not in that place, and he knows it. He knows what's missing. He's trying to find his way to connect with that, his way to get there again. That was the stuff that I really found, that vulnerability, were things I was connecting with in this storyline and eating up. And I was so excited to get to talk about this part because of those moments. Again, they don't mean anything unless you've seen what's come before, but this is, again, a way we're connecting with Bruce that we haven't seen. Actually, the second volume, we didn't get to see a lot of this, because we saw Bruce in a very dark place in the second volume. So this, to me, was like an embracing of everything that I love about Batman after so long being distanced from it, because Jean-Paul was Batman. Even though we had the Search going on, where the Search was reconnecting us with the detective side of Batman, this is connecting us with everything else.
Yeah, he is the great detective, but he is also, one of, if not the greatest warriors on the planet. He is just this machine, and I loved seeing that come out in this. I did love see this. This was a classic, one of those great Rocky training moments where you just see him building himself up. He starts off slow and he gets built. Which each one of these masters, with each one of them, his senses, his skill, his instinct are kicking back in to the point where that first one, he won. But he didn't even take it kind of as a victory because it should have been quicker. That guy wasn't the top master. They sent the lowest of the low of these masters against him. He should have wiped the floor with the guy, and he didn't. He actually struggled and had to, it took him too long to take down the master. I loved seeing that, the fact that it wasn't, yes, it was a victory, but it wasn't good enough of a victory. Well, and that, for me, was just kind of like, wow. And every single time he faces and defeats one of these masters, you see him learning from it. The one he had to use a rock to help, he's like, I shouldn't have used the rock. And it was just his whole approach that he was taking to this training was a really cool insight to Bruce and to Batman and to just the nature of this character.
Well, these lines like things, he's good, strong, fast, deft with his chains, but not good enough to make me struggle this long and hard. He's talking about all this, automatic reflexes and things that he's lost along the way. I loved seeing that kind of stuff. That was, I think, things, again, that made me connect with, wow, this is what it was like to train to be him, just how much he had to go through, even now. And the debates that he had with Shiva after the battle, it's the Sheena, the warrior, with Shiva afterwards about trying to maintain his own philosophy when she is pushing for that. Her hanging the warrior at the end, because she killed him at the end, didn't she?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the guy was defeated and she just killed him. And, again, that was a really cool kind of moment that I didn't see coming. I completely that was the thing that shocked and caught me off guard. And I was like, but it completely made sense for her, and it made sense of how Bruce, continued on from then on, not letting Shiva get her hands on them when he defeated him. I thought that was it showed, Bruce being Bruce.
I love that we get to see Tim in this, who, obviously wouldn't miss a step because he still was Robin during this whole time, getting intel, following John Paul, seeing what he's doing. Trying to make sense of the nonsense and craziness that was surrounding Jean Paul, who's going after these gun runners, but yet clearly having these crazy delusions around him. It was amazing, and this is where we get to see that first medallion that leads him after this whole Leha thing, and questioning whether or not the killer of his father's actually around.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because the one, and I don't know if they intended it to be humorous, but I chuckled when Jean Paul was going into going after the gunrunner. He's like, the visions have subsided. Now it's time to die. I was just like, okay, you got a guy who's coming into battle saying, I was just having some visions over here. I was just hallucinating. Those are done now. Now I'm going to kick your butt. That right there, it adds to another level of Batman and the intimidation factor.
And you're dead.
Yeah.
Not in I'm taking you down, not in you're going to jail, not in you're dead.
Yeah.
And I'm really convinced at this point, his sense of holding back on killing is gone. So, and I think Tim's right when he's saying it's the same old Paul and maybe worse by the minute. It is worse by the minute because Avatar, I think, was for him a crossing of the line that there is no regret, no remorse. He's justified it so heavily in his own head with his delusions that he's convinced that is the route he should go at this point, and that those ends do justify the means, and any innocents that are caught in that crossfire no longer matter. They're just, they're part of his crusade to save Gotham. And if people die along the way, that's fine, as long as his goals are met for the city, and it actually, in the long run, benefits others because of that.
You can look at it as needs of the many outweigh the needs of the fewer, the one. The collateral damage, the tree of liberty must be watered with the blood of patriots. There's a lot of different lines that explain and justify innocent people dying for the greater good, but that is something that I always like about Batman, that he's not one he's not one to put into that mindset. It's not his way. That's not the code. And no matter how intimidating or how scary or even how withdrawn he got from people, he still had that code of rule number one: protect the innocent. And I loved seeing just, you have this such a dramatic difference between, what is the real code of the Bat and this version of the Bat. And it was something that really kind of threw it and glared it in your face and really let you see what makes Bruce such a cool Batman. And, I don't know if they needed to go, to the extreme of him being crazy to play it off, or the whole system. Part of me wonders what would have happened if Jean-Paul had just been a Punisher type person where, he believed that the ends justified the means, that, you have to, there's collateral damage is acceptable as long as you take down the bad guy. I would have liked to see that version of him versus Bruce Wayne and see how that played out and where that and how that, how he could have taken it back.
You can't have that, though, because if you look at Sword of Azrael, his whole creation, the system is a huge part of that. The system is the reason why generation after generation, they're able to tap into all of this memory of combat and how to fight. And so he's dealing with a lot of that being put in there. So you can't, I'm not saying that wouldn't be a cool storyline. I agree with you. It would be a cool storyline. But the distinction here is you've got a Jean-Paul who, and I think the system and him trying to overcome it and figure out who he is without it is what made him having his own series so interesting.
Yeah, and I completely get that, and I enjoyed what I had here because I knew about the system. I knew about how programmed he was and everything. So this all fits in there. I'm not knocking what I got here. It was good storytelling always gets me thinking off the page. And that was the first place I went with this, was when I started thinking off pages, the what if question. What if this? What if that? Like, when we've read the first part, the big question that always was flying through my head is, what if Bruce had gotten 8 hours of sleep and a sandwich into him? Would things have been different? What if he had called in Nightwing? What if? There was a lot of different what if questions. With this one, every one of these sequences, reading this, I did ask that question. What if Azrael wasn't, crazy, if he was just, had a different mindset, had a different, code of conduct. And I think that kind of makes for interesting debates and discussions and whatnot about this character. And it has me curious to read his series to see where it went, see the explanation and the breakdown and dealings with the system and where he went after this. Because I'm definitely interested in reading The Search and reading The Knight's Quest and even reading the stuff after this, because that's Prodigal, right?
Right.
Yeah. I want to pick that up now, and there's so much stuff that I want to read just off because of these 3 volumes. Stuff, trades I want to pick up, and just I want to find out where this story went, and it's and it's because these were well crafted, and I do have this feeling and understanding of who and where these characters are at. So it's just in this reading my history right here has been these trades. It has me wanting more.
This led to Zero Hour. I'm not saying that it led to Zero Hour. Zero Hour was already happening, and every book got 0 issues. So we got the 0 issues, and then Prodigal followed that.
Oh, okay.
So then we had Prodigal's storyline, which is Dick Grayson taking over as Batman, and then Bruce comes back.
Okay.
And a lot of that is a resolution of what is my direction now. So Prodigal served as an opportunity for Bruce to leave. And when Bruce left, they had no idea when and if it was coming back. There was very little communication in how that happened. Dick was given the mantle and taken over, and there was no real indication over what that meant, how long, is it permanent, is it not? Very different. And for anybody who thinks that, this is going to be a rehash of Dick Grayson being Batman this time around, no, it isn't. It's a much younger Dick Grayson who is ready for the role, but not so ready for the role, if that makes sense. A very, very different place, because it wasn't the mentor dying. The mentor's still around. He's just decided that I need to step away, and here you can fill in. With very little idea of, is this permanent? Is this a side gig? Am I making this my life? Am I not? Where when we saw Batman and Robin, the most recent one, you saw Dick Grayson who had to really make the Batman role his because they thought Bruce was dead and never coming back. It's huge distinctions between the two. So Prodigal's well worth seeking out because it's very different in its theme and tone. And it's a great, if you love Tim Drake, the Dick Grayson-Tim Drake relationship, it really is two brothers working together, because this is Tim Drake, who was very heavily into his Robin role at the time. So you've got Dick Grayson taking over fully as Batman, for however long it's going to be, trying to feel his way in that role with his real partner of Tim Drake. So I can't recommend Prodigal enough as just being a terrific story. And I hope it's something at some point in time on the show we end up finding time to do with explorations of all, the current material and trying to stay caught up with, and relevant with modern day stuff. I do hope at some point in time you and I will have an opportunity to revisit that. 'Cause I'm not sure if that's still available in print. We'll have to take a look. Maybe at the end we can discuss that. If it's available in print. But if it is, it's something that I would definitely seek out for anybody listening to this. Now, when he goes off after Leha, I love this sequence with Bruce jumping out of the tree, catching the acorns. You know what I loved about it? It wasn't perfect. 3 of 4. This is an ongoing theme. He's getting better as he's going along, and he's retraining himself in a lot of different ways, mentally and physically. Trying not just to. It's not just about violence. It's about using your smarts. It's about using your skills. It's about living. Yes, he talks about how fighting and living in the moment, but also being totally aware of your surroundings. There's like that whole Zen thing of, can I detect what's going to happen before it actually happens? And I love that aspect of martial arts. I've never had the opportunity to explore martial arts, but I love literature and film and things where they explore martial arts and the sense of discipline. Mental as well as physical, and that they need to be combined. It's not just about punching, kicking, fighting. It's, if anything, it's using that stuff for defense, using that stuff as a guide, using that stuff to calm your own mind and to balance and center yourself. And this, I think, really comes through heavily in this storyline, that sense of that need to find your center and your ability to know everything around you and be at one with all that. I think it's kind of cool. This story really has a cool element to it.
Oh, definitely. And it was neat seeing the next master who came after him. Because, again, with that whole acorn thing, with this, just the call out with the knife, with the axe or whatever that was, and he's got the one acorn sitting on the ground, chung, split the acorn, clean cut. I was just like, dang, that is a cool opening salvo. And it was like the nice layout, the nice pacing on the battle. This was something that I really enjoyed out of all of these fights. You really got a cool sense of flow, a sense of the physical, the panel move through. This was a wonderfully visual story as well as some really cool inner dialogue. So I don't want to, you can't overlook some of the artwork and some of the layout and the pacing that they did physically in the book. I really had a nice sense of adventure with this. I had that, I could visualize everything that was going on.
I love how he disarms his opponent. Like he's going to the arms and taking out the little knives there, really trying to take him down, but also trying to himself do a lot of this without, as assistance. There's no utility belt, no extra tools, things like that. He's really trying to rehone himself as a man. And then coming back and realizing that that opponent that he fought, the first opponent, was now hung, and realizing that it was Shiva, and having to use that against the second master, the one who's the true master, using that as an example, but then realizing to himself, I am in a very dangerous... I think this is where I think he knew going to Shiva that he was going to be dealing with that, but realizing that she is going to do things behind his back, whether he wants them done or not, that he's skirting a very fine line here. I think this is when he first realizes that he's got to come up with an exit strategy to all of this. This leads to things we see later with the exit strategy. But I love that you can look back in this and start saying, this moment, looking up at this, is really where Bruce first started saying, it's not just about what this is going to do for me, making me Batman again. If I'm going to accomplish anything with all of this and walk away from all this to go after Jean-Paul, I have to have a valid exit strategy from this. Otherwise, I'm going to be so caught up in all of this, I'm never going to be able to accomplish my goal with Jean-Paul. It's going to just keep coming and coming and coming and never end. So I've got to deal with Shiva's endgame. So this man has really taken on a lot in this series to put him back in a place where he is once again Batman, once again worthy of his own mantle and being that man. These moments at the end where he's standing on top of the city, the buildings of the city, and looking at the gargoyles and things, and remembering his own sense of freedom and what it meant to dive off of them. And did he think ahead of time, or was that just, his own natural instincts that did that, and trying to reconnect with the man that would leap off of there with with that sense of Gotham is mine and that flow that we've always seen in so many storylines with him. I ate that up.
Oh, yeah.
I would have hated here if he had jumped and done it, because I think it would have been so inappropriate. I love that he didn't, and that he couldn't, and he knew he wasn't ready. That contrasted with the picture you see of him, in that it almost looks like something right out of Year One, just as I did doing that for the first time. I love this sense of age from him, that he's been doing this for so long, and can he do it again? It does. You mentioned Rocky earlier. There's a lot of this that I connect with seeing movies like Rocky Balboa, the most recent Rocky movie.
Oh, yeah, old Rocky.
Yeah, where can I pick that up again? Do I have another fight in me? Do I have another round in me? Do I have another run in me? Can I be that man again after all this time? That was something that I thought was really cool here.
Oh, definite. And it's such a classic Perch moment. He's on the gargoyles that have appeared. That gargoyle style has appeared in how many covers and images, and just the classic Batman looming, da, 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 and he's right there. That's where he first leaped off. That was the first beginning of it. That was the in a way, kind of the birth of Batman, just that releasing, that freedom of him, and he's not there yet. But he's going to get there. And it was something that kept building. And every single time he went back there, I'd sit there like, is this it? And I'm like, nah, he ain't ready yet. He ain't ready yet. Until that final moment when he did leap. I was like, yeah! I cheered as I'm reading a comic book. This book really had a lot of physical stuff going on in my mind's eye, and I was sitting there and I was reacting as if I was watching a movie, as if I was watching a live version of it, and it was a really cool boom final moment. And just these were great teases, great lead ups to it, and it was something that just had me excited. And if you can't tell by just how I'm going on now.
In the opening of this next issue, Shadow of the Bat number 29, it was a 48-page special. When we take a look at this, you've got a special thanks at the beginning to Mike Manley, who was the art on the first one. I liked that, because one of the cool things about this shows that there was a coordination between not just the writers, but also art, and trying to keep the flow of this going. One of my favorite first pages of an issue was this one, because I loved the sense of speed of this master going through, but also the sense of grace. The fact that he's moving so fast, but he's also whispering through the wind, barely touching the ground. There's two bunnies there.
Yeah.
And I love that they never move.
Right.
These are animals we normally think of for speed, but we also think of their sense of urgency to get away from a situation, when they feel there could be any possible danger. This guy touches down like inches from them. They don't bat an eye. That says a lot for what this master's doing as he's moving along. Then you go from this to seeing Bruce, doing the whole lumberjack thing to rebuild his strength. This was something like so out of Rocky IV for me. I love that montage of him training in Russia in Rocky IV, because it was so gritty. You had Dolph Lundgren fighting with that. He had all these machines and high tech and all that, whereas Rocky went back and was really training in a very, very hard, harsh environment. And you got Bruce kind of going back to this kind of let me chop wood, let me do all these things that would build up muscle in a very raw way, of almost in many ways a way that would be more effective for somebody who is going to be fighting on the street. There is no every axe throw is going to be coming from different angles, so you're building muscles from all angles. I love that kind of stuff. To me, there's something that feels very real and strong in the way that it's kind of a natural building. I love when he takes the axe and he jumps on the line and uses that to slide on down. You're seeing a gradual building in this issue of a confidence that we didn't see in issue 1. And it's a gradual build. That was something that I really enjoyed, because I felt like we were growing with him. My excitement was building with each issue of this as we saw a Bruce becoming more confident in himself. He noticed the deer in the background. And I kept thinking, did he really notice a deer, or was the master already on the scene at this point? And I'm convinced now it was the deer. But I love that I was questioning these things even back then. Like this was something from the story that was like really growing in. I love this whole, the hawk swooping in, taking the bat, being this kind of foreshadowing of of good omens for the Master, but then that changing so horribly at the end of the issue where we saw, no, you don't want to at night be a prey of the bat.
Yeah, the night is the time of the bat, and that was, and I'm still not 100% certain if it was the deer. Even though we've seen play out, there's still part of me thinking the Master was there, and I every time I read it, I'm like, no, but part of me wants to say, yeah, the Master was there, and the Master kind of shooed the deer out. But you clearly see later on when, where we see the Master is when he sees the hawk swoop and get the bat, that he's not in that wooded area yet. He hasn't found Bruce. He's still hunting Bruce down and trying to track him down. But I gotta say, I was just so with you. I'm like, yeah, he sensed him. Oh, no, yeah. Did he? Wait, was he actually there? And there's still that doubt. And I love seeing that because, again, it is the evolution and the growth and return of Batman.
And I hate to even reference this now because I'm going to reference it very quickly because we're going to go into a heavy discussion when this hits. Bane later, when he's aware Bruce is back, I felt like it was that kind of moment where, like, is Bruce then aware that this is coming? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like,
maybe there's that element there. Like, maybe Bruce's awareness isn't just in his immediate proximity. It's an awareness that time is here. It's the next Master is going to be coming. That's going to be, is that what's driving it too? Can we take it to that level? Maybe. I don't know. This is where, like, I think you could see why I geek out so much for this story. It's this type of thing was going on every issue of this. We haven't even gotten anywhere near him facing Jean-Paul yet. And then the geek out moments from these first two issues alone were just through the roof. And it was funny, the Jean-Paul stuff for me, I was enjoying all of it because I think it was building more of that. But it was so much this Bruce focus for me throughout all this. I'm like, yes, he's coming back and we're going to see him take him down and win, whatever. It was really, I'm with you. It got to the point, it wasn't about beating up Jean-Paul anymore. It was about seeing Bruce ready to don the mantle and seeing the true Batman back. That was what I so wanted to see by the end of this. And it was this journey that changed my focus from being anti-Jean-Paul to being pro-Bruce. And I think that was where the shift occurred for me. He didn't matter anymore. Yeah. He just didn't. Other than to serve as a foe for Bruce coming back. I love this stuff, though, because he's almost like... Did you start to question whether these things were inside his head where he was trying to rationalize all this? Like, sometimes the discussions he was having with St. Duma and then with his father and all that, when they were trying to say that this is here, this isn't here, this is a feeling, this isn't a feeling, was almost his subconscious wrestling with, are you making all this up? Or is it really happening to you? Like, a lot of the questions you were asking earlier, to me, seem to be the questions that Jean-Paul has here, if you follow me.
Oh, yeah. And I took it that it was just a crazy guy having crazy man visions. And that's where I was taken from. And the crazy visions, I really didn't take... I know he has the system, and I know the system's kind of whack, but I took it that it was his brain kind of fracturing. And when the brain starts fracturing, it tries to do stuff to pull you back in. And this is the system fractured his brain, and this is his brain trying to fix it. But it still has the corruption from the system, so he can't be 100% free of it. But as things go on and things keep getting worse, I took it that it wasn't the system anymore, because the system, when it kicks in, he kind of blanks out. He's actually still acting and interacting with these things. So I was taken as just his brain went bye-bye. It just, you have those moments where it just snaps and the rational and the logic just kind of slip out and you go down the path whatever happens.
Now, I don't know how much of this was intended here, but I see a lot of my feelings about the system and Jean-Paul are obviously going to be biased by the fact that I've read many, many issues of Azrael where they start to explore this. And there comes a point in time where you start to realize that when he's not in system mode, the system's still there, but he's able to gradually start controlling things or trying to learn to control things, if that makes sense. There was hundreds of issues, I think it was at least 100 issues of Azrael. going through, and then a lot of storytelling of him crossing over in other books and things like that in his own run. So there's a lot of that like how much of that grew out of this and then led to explanations of things that were never intended in this storyline. You know what I mean? Which just shows the kind of writer that Denny O'Neil is, that he's able to take something like this that wasn't intended to lead, because I don't think at this point it was maybe intended to lead to a series. I think it was just during this storyline. I forget, Denny O'Neil's been on interviews where he's mentioned this leading to an Azrael series, and that this wasn't meant to be a character that would go beyond this. And I think the popularity of all of this led them to, led them to have a very successful run for a book with Azrael.
Oh, cool.
It's a great, honestly, the series, if you're interested in him at all from any of this, I can't recommend the series enough. I really enjoyed it. I was glad when they recently brought back the concept of Azrael, and they did a new Azrael, just because I've always liked the concept, and it was because of this type of storytelling with him and these debates we're having with the system, and who is the real man and can you overcome this kind of stuff.
Now, one of the things that I did kind of have a question on.
Sure.
Within this issue, we see basically, to my mind's eye, the return of Dick Grayson back into the Bat family and his initial involvement when Bruce pulls in him and Tim in, and they start talking about the Order of Duma and just everything that's going on, and he asks for their help, and you kind of, now, was this really in this whole story the initial pulling in of Dick Grayson, or did he have appearances before this that I missed?
He had an appearance before this. And I believe it was in Robin's book. He and Robin had a conversation prior to all this.
Oh, okay.
And it was before Bruce was actually back, where they finally had to sit down and have a discussion. Question starts coming up with, why didn't he call me in to begin with? Why is this guy
the man? Yeah, yeah. And I like the fact that they do show this, and there is even Bruce saying, hey, I made a mistake. If I'd known what kind of psychopath this guy is, I wouldn't have given it to him. I wouldn't have picked him. And I like the fact that Bruce, he does acknowledge that he made a mistake, and it's, Dick Grayson being hurt and insulted by it, and there was always a question in my mind, why not go with him? Why not, just call him in from the very beginning? And
that's something. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, because you're making an excellent point here, and this is something why I recommend reading Prodigal. Right. Because you're meant to be thinking all this right now. This wasn't Dick Grayson's first appearance. Dick Grayson's first appearance sets up a lot of the emotion that you're seeing from Dick Grayson here.
Okay.
And what the reality is, we've touched on this throughout this. Bruce is not the great communicator, especially when it comes to his sons. And this is something where these conversations that he's having with him are very un-Bruce-like. For him to admit his mistakes and to admit that, this is not something at this time you were used to seeing with Bruce. And I think this was something I was deeply connecting with, because you're having these emotional moments where he's saying, hey, goofed. And for him to openly admit it to these two. One thing I like about it, though, is, and this is a great thing about Bruce, he's admitting his mistake, but he's not letting his mistake rule him. He is getting down to business and taking responsibility for it and taking action. And these two are supporting him because of their belief and respect for him, in spite of whatever has come between them, whatever friction has, especially for Dick Grayson, a lot of friction over the years between Dick Grayson and Bruce Wayne, because Bruce is Bruce. And everything that Bruce has gone through has made Bruce often very, very hard to deal with for his immediate family, including this is a guy now, he's chased away Alfred. Of all the people to finally chase away. So in this storyline right here, you got Alfred is not in the picture. Alfred had to leave. He had to leave because he could not continue watching his son do this to himself. So Alfred, a lot of this that's going on right now, Alfred doesn't know.
See, that just I was completely shocked by that. I had no idea Alfred wasn't in the picture. I didn't see him in any of these issues. I just, it didn't even dawn on me that Alfred wasn't around.
No, he'd reached his own emotional breaking point of saying, I can't, you are not listening. And we saw that leading up to all this. There were issues in Knightfall, predating Knightfall, where he was watching just how destructive Bruce's path had led him to, physically and emotionally. And he got to the point where he's like, I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to guide you. I'm trying to be here for you and, help you to survive all this, but you're not listening to me. And you're not letting me help you. You're not letting me, guide the situation. And you are continuing to head down a path that is going to possibly destroy you even worse than what Bane had done to you. How can you expect me to stick here and stay this? I need you to stop. I need you to listen to me. And we need to, take a different path, a different direction. And Bruce just can't. He's got to keep, because he's Bruce. It's one of the things we love about him is that Bruce's moral code means, in his mind, he has to continue on. He can't let injustice continue around him. Even when the fact that the guy was on 2 canes, doing severe damage to a back that was already, has been broken, continuing to just add to the possibility that for life he's going to be in severe pain for the rest of his life. Yet he's still continuing to fight on against this stuff because he's Batman. He can't, with or without the cowl, this man cannot let injustice continue. I mean, who would come back from everything that he's been through and see Jean-Paul Valley and just going to go, you know what? I need to do this to myself so I can take this guy down and take back this horrible job. It's great. It's great. It's only in Batman that you're going to get this. And you're going to go, yes, this is exactly what you should do. Because we're all saying that, even though what he's doing is nuts.
Dude, it's beyond insane.
Yes.
The Batman as a concept is just a level beyond just wrong, but
yes,
it's so right.
Well, that's what it is. It's a certain kind of wacky that you just can't help but follow. I mean, it's crazy, but it's the great thing about it. I mean, it's what's great about it is it's great fantasy fiction. I mean, you just can't help but, because nobody in their right mind should ever do this. They should be arrested if they do this. But yet, for some reason, these writers who have written this character for these years make you believe that this is what should happen. That there is this place called Gotham where a guy like this is not only okay, it's what that place needs.
Yeah.
And I'm a bat junkie. Even though I can sit there and say that this is just wrong, I so get sucked into believing in it. It's great. But yeah, no, you're this is like the second-ish appearance of Dick Grayson and all this. One thing I actually want, before we go any further, we keep mentioning the Punisher. I should note that alongside all of this, there were 2 Punisher Batman one-shots that were released. One featuring Jean-Paul Valley was written by Denny O'Neil with the Punisher. And then a later one featuring a returned Bruce with the Punisher.
Oh, cool.
And that had a different writer. I forget who the writer was on that one. But both of them, it was interesting to see the contrast of two very different Batman with the Punisher. This was at a time where you could get the occasional DC Marvel crossover of characters like that. And I mean, what a better time to have Batman and the Punisher than this time.
Yeah.
So there are one-shots for anyone out there interested in seeking them out. They actually were released during this time frame. The first one was the one with, I'm almost positive it was it had to have been because Jean-Paul was Batman at the time. So that was written by Denny O'Neil. And then there was another one with Bruce. So for anybody who's interested in seeing what that would be like, and they were those prestige one-shots.
Okay. Yeah.
So definitely worth seeking out. I know you're going to the C2E2 con, so those might be some fun things if you end up finding them on the show floor to grab and read just for fun. They were cool. I liked them. I mean, I'm a big fan of those type of crossovers. These what if Marvel Universe could interact with DC like that, and you get to see those. I hope at some point there's a way for the two companies to do things like that again. I'm sure there will be at some time, but I don't know if now with Warner and Disney being so in charge of them, if there's going to be those opportunities as much. When you see Legion of Superheroes and Doctor Who, and when you see Legion of Superheroes and Star Trek happening, that gives me some hope that there's some possibilities that you'll see some of the DC characters interacting with Marvel at some point. I would hope.
I would think so, because you know what? In the end, the almighty dollar does rule, and if you get the right people doing it, they would do very well. And both companies, I don't see it as a blood feud between the two companies. It is two businesses. So, but each one right now is in a different place where I couldn't see DC saying, yes, we should do this right now, because where everything going on with the new 52, it would have to be a new 52 character, and then everything going on over Marvel right now, it's like, I think both companies are in a position where it would be good for either one of them to go with it. But it'll happen one day, and it'd be kind of neat to read some of that stuff.
This second issue is really pretty critical for this one because it served in this storyline with Nightwing to bring everyone up to speed to the background of Azrael and what drives him. So, you can kind of see what Bruce is going up against, who he's put in the position of being Batman. Also, his own justification as far as what he was thinking, that this person was trained, they have the skills, and maybe I can guide him to be a successor. He was looking for a successor to his role, and that was what he was thinking he was going to have there. So that shows his mindset leading up to Knightfall was that he was eventually thinking of retiring. And now he's got to come back from this horrible injury and put himself through it all again when he was seriously considering stepping away, either doing it part-time or fully retiring from this role. So it's an interesting storyline, and he didn't want to put that on Dick Grayson. He wanted him to be his own man, which shows the respect, even though he doesn't vocalize it and voice it, it shows the respect in his heart that he has for, his eldest son.
Yeah.
Which I love. That kind of stuff I eat up. That gets me choked up. It's like seeing that kind of, it's this man who can't speak his emotions a lot of times.
Yeah.
I can't recommend enough The End of Prodigal to see this. They have this wonderful moment. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to say anything more than that. But for anybody out there who's never read Prodigal, you have to read that storyline all the way through to see it at the end, because all of this builds to such a wonderful, great moment between the two of them that has no meaning if you don't read that all the way through. So me saying the moments there it doesn't take anything away from, you got to see it, and understand why it gets there and what it means for the two of them. It's very cool. This is a great time to be a Bat fan. We talk about this golden age that we have right now of just wonderful creators, and I totally stand behind that. This reminds me of why I'm so invigorated by this right now, because this feels like stepping back into this kind of stuff. I mean, this was going on back here. This was the kind of Batman high energy you were getting during this time with Batman storytelling. We're getting that now. It's very today, very modern with the new writers that are doing everything now and everyone that's associated with the Bat family right now. But you look back to stuff like this, and this is what they're doing today. Court of Owls is this kind of stuff.
And I really dig seeing the couple panel fight sequence that Dick and Tim had. And you see them just take down those guys, and it was a really cool combo fighting, and just they were having fun while they were being serious while they were doing it. And at the end they're like, and they both acknowledged that they were trained by the best, and they you could see that mutual respect back up to Bruce right in that moment, even though Grayson was angry with Bruce because he wasn't, because he went with Jean-Paul. You can still see there is still the love, there is still the respect there. And I loved just that moment of not only just seeing exactly how good these two are, but then the recognition back to the mentor, back to Bruce.
But also how good they are together, Jim.
Yeah.
This really is just a great building of a continued building of a big brother, little brother relationship between these two that I'm so fond of seeing with these two anytime they're together.
Amen.
And it's just great because it's not something you're going to get with Bruce and Dick or Bruce and Tim. You've got to get it with Dick Grayson and Tim in these moments. And it's why was it so cool to see Dick Grayson with Damian? Because that's a way different contrast than Bruce and Damian. That's what's fun about seeing Bruce with him now, is it's not a rehash of what we saw with Dick Grayson. It's very different because Bruce is a very different guy. So there's just some great storytelling opportunities that I think they're taking advantage of in Batman that works so well back now with very different, very rich characters that you can read this, enjoy seeing these relationships develop, and know that the current relationships that we're seeing are similar in their approach, but going to be so vastly different because the characters are very different. We see Jean-Paul setting up this, you're using this private number, meet me at Mohawk Plaza in 30 minutes alone. He's setting up a buy, or, a sell, and really setting up villains. But while this is happening, the other setup that's happening is the situation with the Master, where he's setting up booby traps that are going to be in place for Bruce when Bruce gets there. And I just loved the pacing of this issue. I loved how there is not a wasted page, and we never forget any parts of the storyline, because you reference, we go back to Tim and Dick, we go back to the Master, we go back to Jean-Paul, and every time we have a few pages with somebody, we're thrust back into the other storyline that's been going on. I thought everything was so well pushed for every character. Every major player in this is being gradually moved into positions for the eventual confrontation between all of these combustible elements that you know is coming. And I loved that about this storyline. There's never a part where you're like, well, it's been 2 issues and we haven't seen Jean-Paul. No, we're seeing him get hit with a sledgehammer going through his own kind of gauntlet of sorts.
Stop. Hammer time.
Yeah. Just great stuff that was going on in this.
And the thing that got me with that, I laugh about the hammer time, but what I liked about that sequence was it showed the difference between Jean-Paul and Bruce.
Yes.
Because Bruce is got logs being thrown at him, and he's dodging and bobbing and weaving. It's, stick and move and just, kind of doing the leapfrog Frogger thing, where Jean-Paul's fighting these guys and he's relying on the armor to protect him. It's a completely different upfront, it's, that in-your-face violent side versus the graceful style. And I love seeing that contrast really brought to light, especially because you look at Jean-Paul's scene, it's bright, indoors, brightly lit. Then you get to the shadows of Bruce. You kind of get back to the night, get back to the strength of the bat. The night's the time of the bat. And I really ate that up because you're seeing, again, the differences between these two characters, between these two men.
I've got to talk about this dialogue because I think this is so essential, and it's so Bruce Wayne, it's so Batman. I think it is an element of this character because we know that Bruce, realistically, is not a very well man. I mean, and it's something he still struggles with to this day. We see growth with this guy throughout his storytelling throughout the years, and it's been something I think it's been great for anyone who's touched on this character and examined his psyche. They've touched on the fact that this guy over time, because of his associations and the people around him, has had growth and healing that, has been gradual. But masks, he knows them well, and their dark purpose to hide the man within, to let him disappear, possessed by the spirit of the mask. The mask of Tengu is not the mask of the bat, but as Shiva said, it would serve the same purpose. Allow Bruce Wayne and his problem-ridden life, so important there because we've seen this, to ebb away, while the talents that he'd spent a life perfecting could break through once again and reactivate the spirit of the bat. Then you lead into that to those logs you're talking about, and that moment, no thoughts to cloud his mind. He has no time to think or plan or even doubt. He has no partner, no tricks, no bat line, no utility belt to help him. He has only himself. That moment was poetry. I was watching that the mixture with that artwork and that whole sequence there. I mean, this is really flawless execution of great comic sequencing and great comic timing in the way that this is presented. This is one of my favorite sequences. Just seeing him jump between these logs. These are things that only Batman can do. And knowing that he just barely did it. It took him a lifetime to become the Batman. Can even he do it again? The questions that he's asking along the way, breaking through in these sequences with everything he's going through. It's amazing, because this isn't him reclaiming his bat mantle at this point either. Everything he just went through there, he's still questioning. This isn't enough yet. This isn't over. I'm not ready yet. I don't know. Giant logs are coming down and you're able to jump on them and dodge them and do what he just did. I'd say that's very Batman. Yeah. Not him.
He's not there yet. He's still got a little bit more to go.
Yeah.
And
come on, buck up, buddy. You got to work at it. It's great. It's just great stuff. And we all believe it.
No, and even when he takes down the guy, it's still, he's like, I love that moment because they're sitting there talking about, two men facing off, one facing for vengeance, one looking for justice. And I just loved seeing how it was just playing back and forth, boom, boom, boom. And he finally, when Bruce takes him down, he's like, I should be tired, but I'm not. It's night. It's time of the bat. And I was like, yeah!
Those are those. I'm so glad to hear you say that you had those moments. You know, there's one part with Jean-Paul I want to jump back to real quick, because this shows the difference between him and Bruce, because Bruce wouldn't have done this. Take him. How many crimes have they committed, these dull-witted pigs? How much pain have their ugly hands doled out? And they suck the very life from decent, good-living folk. It does show that he's got in there a sense of goodness, a sense of redemption. But this bit where he's saying, do what the man says, take me. I said, take me. The look on those two guys, they're subdued at this point. They can be arrested. I'm going to be argued that these two guys, if you said, turn yourselves in right now, they're dropping their weapons and turning themselves in. He initiates the contact with them. With that take me, he slashes them. There was no need for that. They're running.
Yeah.
You know? No, don't leave yet. I haven't finished your lesson. I mean, Oh,
yeah, and that was the kind of stuff that, you know, when I'm reading this, you know, it really, you know, hit home that this guy is just nuts. This is just, you know, the system, was there and it broke him. The system fractured the brain, and that's what we're dealing with, is a crazy man who's well-trained, who's well-armed, and that's kind of a whole nother level of scary.
But I think it's his own identity crisis, too, recognizing that he doesn't know who he is. And nobody can spread fear like Batman.
Yeah.
He keeps saying he's Batman, but he's, you know, it's one of those he doth protest too much. Well, in this case, it's he doth brag too much, because I think deep down at his core, he knows. And we will see it at the end of this. But right here is the first inkling that he knows he's not the man. He is not who he says he is. He's fighting so much to convince everybody and himself that he is. And that's leading to his crazy.
Yeah. It's tormenting at himself. And it's funny because how, you know, fans all call him Asbats, and it's always referred to as Asbats. He kind of does it right there. He kind of calls himself Asbats, and it's, I like seeing that. I was like, oh, that's kind of neat, and it actually made me wonder if those type of sequences were where Asbats came from, or if that was just something that people born and they just came up with, or where did it come from? And
I have no idea the answer to that one.
Yeah, I know. That was just a throw out there.
You know, when these two, you already alluded to the great ending between the battle between the Master and Bruce, but when they go falling into the water, he lands badly, a sharp pain in his back. For an instant, his mind floods with fear. Has he pushed it too far, too fast? I love this because it reminded me of what Barbara Gordon was going through in recent issues of Batgirl. You know, this sense of, I'm back, I have all this, but, you know, how weak is that back? Can I lose it again? Yeah. I love that his mind went there, because that was, I thought, very human. And that was another, you know, I talked about how much I connected with his vulnerability in this. Those are moments we don't see very often with Bruce, with those kind of internal dialogue moments. And I really loved that, because I felt that was something that made him feel more natural and human.
Oh, yeah, this issues would have been completely different if we didn't have that pathway into his mind. If we just got the sullen, quiet Bruce and we didn't know what was going on inside him. This was, you know, it's the usage of inner dialogue is a really strong tool in comics, and right here we're really seeing it used correctly. And it's funny because there was a lot of reading, there was a lot of where you had to go with this, but I never sat there and I never felt overwhelmed. I never felt like I was like, wow, that's a lot. You know, it was a marathon reading this because, you know, I'm sitting there reading these in one sittings and, you know, focusing and getting ready for the show. But it never felt like the story I was reading was, you know, too much. I never, while I was reading, I'm like, come on, enough with this. Let's get on with it. It just kept pulling me in and in and in, and it kept driving the story along. And it was just that nice, you know, well balance of action, of story, of soul, of character, of just growth, and it kept me going, kept me wanting more.
I reread this 3 times in preparation for this part, and I got to be honest with you. First of all, I don't know why I reread it 3 times. I didn't really need to. It was one of those where the story, like the first time through, I so reconnected with it again the way that I did when I read it when I was younger. But oh man. Every read-through, I mean, I had the same experience where I had a certain goal as far as how many issues I wanted to read in the read-through, just because I wanted to make sure that I was keeping myself fresh for this discussion between us. I found myself just like, I can read one more issue. I'd like to kind of read one more. I'm kind of, I want to read that bit again. And I found myself just being sucked in every single time on this one. And it is it's funny how I loved the first two trades. This is no knock on them or any of the creative teams involved with it, because I do think that my enjoyment of this completely comes from the incredible setup, all of that built to this. But this part in particular for me is the one where I just kept going back to it, and I kept wanting to read it again more. And it's I think because it's such a dark place in the first two parts for Bruce, that you get like such a sense of hope from all this in seeing like, wow, after all that, look at what we've got now. You know, it's this build to this guy rebuilding himself and becoming that man again that we see at the end of this issue when he flew. You know, who's trying to connect with that guy again and be that guy again, knowing he's not there yet. I love these ending sequences with these pages every time we keep seeing it, and how his memories become more vivid of what it was like in his younger days when he did that. And the little smile across his face when he did it for the first time, even though, you know, and then shifting to present day and trying to reconnect. I don't know, there's something about that I just thought was really, really terrific.
Look at those strange little beetles. They look... Great neutron!
You and I we just took a little break, which is because we had a good segment break right there before we go into Detective Comics number 676. And you and I were just having a casual discussion about what it was like at this time, right before this Knightsend storyline came in. And I was fed up with Jean-Paul at this point, because the difference between Jean-Paul taking over and being Batman and when Dick Grayson did, not even just in Prodigal, because Prodigal was great, but years later when he took over, you actually were enjoying the guy who was like the other person who was under the cowl. You were rooting for him. While the crusade was going on, you're seeing a guy he's being everything but Batman. Like, yes, he's going after the villains, but he's not like, he doesn't have the code that we come to expect from a hero. You know, letting somebody die, letting people die, going overly violent, initiating these combat sequences, it's not Batman. And the Punisher references, that's where they come into it. It is appropriate in the anti-hero stories. Batman's not an anti-hero. And that's the huge distinction. Jean-Paul is an anti-hero when he's Batman. And there's an interesting distinction there at that moment. You know, I mean, he's a hero, but he's not. You know, he's got like this sense of bringing justice. But when you're letting people die and you're crossing those lines, you've crossed into a territory where the term vigilante applies a lot more than it does to, at least in my sense of it, than it does to Batman. Because with Batman, he still respects that there's law. He still respects law and order. He respects what the police do. He tries to help the police versus make decisions for the police. Jean-Paul could care less about the police being there. They just happen to be there.
Yeah, it's all about his mission, his goal, what he wants to do, how he wants to do it. And, yeah.
There are rules, forget about it. Detective Comics is great because this is a lot of the stuff we were talking about in our previous discussions with 676. We're seeing Dick Grayson and Tim break into the Batcave.
Yeah.
And Tim's showing Dick a different way to get in, and the two of them are trying to sneak in to, again, gather intel. And a lot of this is Dick Grayson, not a lot of this, all of this is Dick Grayson's first real clues to just how far and how twisted this guy is. You know, seeing the gun like batarangs coming out of Jean-Paul and what they do to the villains in that shooting gallery that's there. This is a guy who's got a gun. You know, he's basically armed with a gun. And Dick has to see the sharp contrast of this guy to Bruce and in the way that he operates. And that is, I mean, I think this sequence is very much reminiscent of what a Punisher would do with
definite.
In these situations. That's what I like about it. I love the cliffhanger where it winds up being Harold instead of being Jean-Paul, how Dick is ready to, like, let's finally confront this guy. It ends up being Harold. I love seeing Harold back. And Dick Grayson's, and I know I'm jumping ahead to some of this, Dick Grayson's sense that this is not home anymore. Because I think this happens, like, I went to my father's house for Easter, and I grew up there. And I love being there because there is that reminiscence of home, because I grew up in that house. But yet so much has changed since I've moved out, because I've been out for a long time, that it feels like home, but yet now it feels like his house, not my house, if that makes sense. So there is that warmth of home, but yet the differences and changes make me realize just how much my home now is really my home. and I'm in that place. Dick Grayson's in that place there. And I loved, like, I had a different connection with that this time around than I had when I was younger and I read it, because I was still living at home when I read this originally years ago. So it was interesting to read that this time around and see this story in a different way. This is why I do recommend for people, pull out some of your old comics and reread them, because it's fun to see years later how your perspective is going to change, your shift's going to change, and the way you connect with these characters is going to change. I really connected with Dick Grayson on a very different level in this sequence, because you can't experience that if you haven't left home.
And you know, the weird thing for me is I really haven't read a lot of stories with Grayson in this costume of his, with this style of the Nightwing costume. I'm more with the modern, more present-day Nightwing outfit, so the gold trim and just the more flamboyant, more stylish, style costume is something. I've seen it, I've seen the images of it, and I have read a couple stories, but it never really was, the regular occurrence for me. So it was kind of weird for me reading this and seeing Nightwing, seeing him look like this, whereas because I'm so used to the other style. Yeah,
it's a very different, especially with him with the ponytail and stuff like that, and things that are no longer part of his whole look, because it's more today.
Yeah,
and again, we're going back to Asbats, sweeping into this buy that he set up that really sets up potential killings for a lot of these people down there, letting them shoot at each other and take each other out, and those ends justifying the means. But then having a little bit of crazy creep up onto him when he captures the big bad.
Well, and I do wonder, again, because we talked about the crazy creep in and what's causing the crazy. You see, he's doing the stuff that Batman shouldn't be doing.
Right.
And that's when the crazy creeps in. That's when it hits. That's when he starts having these flashes, when he's having these moments that he's doing an un-Batman-like thing. And it's kind of like, I took it as it is sort of the subconscious. It is the mind telling him, you're wrong here. Don't do it like this. You got to be different. This isn't the way of the bat. And that was something that came through like second, third read through when I really started looking when the crazy fires, when the crazy happens. Especially in this sequence, you see it. It's the worst timing for him because he's in the middle of a fight. The bad guy gets away, but in a way, it was a good thing because that bad guy lived. So it's he didn't go overboard. He didn't cross the line again. And maybe it is the crazy protecting him. Maybe it is the crazy trying to help him out.
Or the system.
Yeah.
Because part of me thinks that, too. Because here's a part where you failed the lineage of Azrael. So he's not Azrael. You've stained the mantle of the bat with blood. You're not Batman. You are a heretic, a charlatan, an imposter. That's his mind telling he doesn't know who he is. And that real, is that his mind? Is that the system? Is it a combination of the two? I don't know. But that's really what's driving all this. So I don't know that it's one or the other. I think it's a combination of a whole bunch of things. I think the system can't keep up with all the crazy that's going on with him at those moments. That's the interesting part. And his own identity crisis. Like, who is he? And maybe, I shouldn't say, I should probably add this element into it. Maybe it is the real him, that nice kid that we saw early on in the beginning, also kind of creeping through and going, hey, is this who I want to be? Is that in there too? Again, adding another, you've got like 4 or 5 different things being thrown at you then if you add that into the mix.
Yeah, there's a lot going on as who he is and what he's about.
Because if you don't, I think everybody's got to hit that. I think we all hit that point in our life where, I know for me it was in my 20s. Like, who am I and what is my direction going to be? It's funny, coincidentally enough, when I was reading a lot of this. But, I mean, we all go through that point. Sometimes it's teenage years, sometimes it's later. For me, it was my mid-20s, early to mid-20s. I went through this period where I was like, trying to figure out, with people telling me what my direction should be, combating against what I think my direction should be, and finally coming to the conclusion of who I am and who I should be. I think we've all gone through this in our life. I didn't have giant religious order deities kind of popping in front of me. Thank goodness.
Really? I did, yeah.
Yes. But I mean, we've all been at elements of our life where, you just really, what is my identity? And there's usually a lot of things outside and inside that are influencing the conflict that we all go through at this point. So I think there is something relatable to the deep level of insanity that John Paul's going through here, which is one of the things I also like about the story, because I think that you can relate to what Bruce is going through in these similar sequences. Because he and John Paul are really kind of going through similar problems. Like, Bruce is at the point where he's trying to determine who he is. Jean Paul's trying to determine who he is. So I wonder if at the end, when we see what happens with Bruce and Jean Paul, if maybe that's part of what drives Bruce's decision at the end. We'll have to talk about that when we get there, because I do think there are some interesting parallels to what the two of them are going through, without the violent crazy on Bruce's end.
Right.
but we do argue that there is a little crazy involved in all this for him.
You know, it's funny because there's a lot crazy going on with Bruce, but it's a controlled crazy.
Yes.
It's a focused crazy. It's, you know, there is an insanity to what he's doing, and you would think you would wonder if he actually just sat down as a child, if he sat down with a psychiatrist and talked through these emotions, would there actually be a Batman? Would this have actually come if he would have found a more positive way to deal with his anger, a positive way to deal with his guilt and his, with the death of his parents as a child? Would there be a Batman? Would there be something else going on? Would it be something completely different? And it always cracks me up whenever I start thinking about Bruce and seeing these sequences with him where you see how disciplined, how borderline insane he is, just the way he trains, that I do wonder what would happen, where it would go. And, you know, Nightwing and, and Robin here, Tim and Dick are just two prime examples of, they also had these tragic occurrences. They've also had these, amazing, absolutely horrific things happen to them, but they dealt through it, a little bit more positive. They're a little bit lighter. They're a little bit brighter than what Bruce did and how Bruce came through. And I love seeing just that evolution and that change in each of the generations.
I love that we've come to accept that Bruce is the cool crazy.
Yeah.
Somehow that's it'd be okay if we were that. And actually, the funny part is, we give a pass all the time to Nightwing and Tim. Like, what they're doing is excessively rational. And that's the funny part about comics and this world that's crafted here, because you come to accept that this is cool. And I'm totally I'm every goofy nonsense thing that I'm saying right now, where I'm saying that they're crazy and all this other kind of stuff too. I guarantee, I so want to be Dick Grayson's the guy you want to be,
Oh, big time.
But yet, the fact that he dons this costume and does all this is something we should not want to do, but yet we do. That's what makes us comic fans, I think.
Yeah.
It's that sense of, yes, we can totally justify that it's crazy, yet we want to be a superhero. We want to do these things. I want to be the Dick Grayson superhero, though. I'm convinced of that. I love Bruce Wayne. Bruce is my favorite, but I would hope that if I were ever to do this, that I would be half as cool as Dick Grayson comes off.
Yeah, see, I think I'd rather be Tim.
Oh, I know you would, yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather be Tim, and just his style, I think, that's where I'd want to be, because there is still a kind of quasi-normal teenager going on there. Tim's has a semi-normal life, and you see him trying to have a social life. You see him interact and actually doing stuff outside of just putting on the costume and being Robin or Red Robin, whichever way, wherever he is in life. So I would like to be Tim, where he's focused and he's committed to the cause, but it's not his existence. It's not his life. There is a Tim Drake there. Here's
the difference between the two. The reality is, one of the things that you like about Tim Drake is there's an accessibility to Tim Drake where he's an everyman. And I say that knowing that he's Red Robin, he's super cool, and I love, he's used to the computers and things like that. But I think there's an accessibility to Tim where you're like, wow, Tim really is one of the guys. Dick Grayson is like that guy with the swagger that we all wish we could be and know that we'll never pull off. You know what I mean? He's
got the strut.
Yes.
He's got the strut.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I think Dick Grayson's the guy that I'd want to be. Tim Drake has that accessibility that, why do we love him so much? Because I think out of the three, most often with Tim Drake, he's the guy that you can most see yourself being, But Dick Grayson's the guy, like, I want to be Dick Grayson. Like, I would love to be viewed as cool as Dick Grayson. Because in and out of the costume, everyone just kind of likes this guy. You know? He's got that, like, charisma and that personality. And, like, he always has it easy, getting the girl and doing all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like, for us geeky comic fans, like, he's the guy you look at and go, wouldn't it be cool to be him? I got no illusions at all. It never going to happen. It never has. It never will. But that's what you love about him. And you don't look at him and like get jealous of him. You look at him and go, man, he's just cool, and you can't help but like him too. He's that kind of guy because he's nice and his intentions are good and he's got the swagger and everything just works for him. And even when things aren't working for him, like, he's still Dick Grayson. Like, that's what's cool about him. And I think he has that. It's one of the reasons why I think when there were even rumors that they were going to kill him off or something like that, fans who really get the character were so mortified and rallying behind him because there's a huge distinction between him and Tim Drake, which I think we're touching on right here. They are two so totally different characters, yet you get totally why they get along so well, but they are drastically different.
Yeah.
And, there are similarities, sure, and things like that. Like, but the way Tim operates, the way Dick operates are very different. They're very complementary of each other. And I don't know, I so eat it up when we go in through these discussions because it's something that's a testament to all the creators that have worked on all of these characters throughout the years, going all the way back to the beginnings of Batman, all the way through. The development of these characters over time and the longevity of them where they've crafted them to modern day, they've stuck to some really core values and core presentations of the characters that have stayed very consistent. Like, I think the Dick Grayson presented here is exactly who I saw him as Robin years ago when he was a kid. The Tim Drake that we see here is the Tim Drake that we see now. I think they're characters that Bruce is the Bruce that we see now who's been through this. He's changed from it, but he's been through this. And Dick Grayson's evolved too, but yet at their core, I don't know, maybe you can be more objective about this than I can. I am finding that every one of these characters, I can easily plug them into their books now and say these things happened to them in their past. And I don't feel like there's anything right now where I'm looking at it and going, there's nothing here that contradicts anything that I'm reading now in the New 52 with these characters, as far as who they are as people.
Yeah, the only thing that I would have an issue with is the actual time crunch of, Bruce went through all of this in just 5 years. Right. And that's the only placement I would have with just question of, fitting it in. But character-wise, who they are, how they're acting, how they're reacting to circumstances completely fits to what I'm seeing now. And it's actually one of the things that I enjoyed about reading this was that these characters are so recognizable. They're so comfortable. Bruce in the first two parts was this broken shell of a man. I'm like, dude, this is the Batman. Come on. And now we're seeing the Batman here. Tim, we're seeing that kid who is, the sidekick, who is that, right hand, who is that guy you want watching your back. And Dick coming in, just Nightwing. He is Nightwing. And just, everything is just, it's so fit, and it, kind of fit into what I was comfortable with, who I'm comfortable with, and what I think these characters are supposed to be like. Boom, I'm reading it right here.
Do you think that it's funny that now that you say that? Because first of all, I love everything they're doing right now. I really love, like, in Action Comics what they've done. I love in Justice League what they've done. I love in Batman what they've done, with all. But I mean, talk about Justice League and Action Comics in particular, where it's a modern retelling of the initial meeting of the Justice League and revamping the new team, and then what they've done in Superman with retelling his origin and everything. I almost wonder, why did they have to put? I almost wish they didn't put that 5-year number on it. Like, I don't know that was necessary. Like, why couldn't it have been vague? Because I don't know, like, when you're reading this storyline, like, I get a sense that Bruce has been doing this a while in this storyline. But there's never this sense of a number of how many years Bruce has been doing it. That's always something that's been vague. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I kind of like the vague nature of it because I think as fans, we can kind of work out our own timeline. I almost think, and it's not a knock, it's not like ruining my storytelling and all that, but when you said that right now, like, I'm choosing to believe this happened in Bruce's storytelling, because I like the storyline and I want to believe it's still a part of all these characters. So I'm choosing to believe it happened. which means I'm trying to shove it into a time frame that just doesn't make any sense at all, which I don't care. It doesn't ruin anything for me, but I almost feel like that number, because I love the premise of the New 52. I love the idea that it's open-ended for creators to pull into storylines that they want to, that fit their directions moving forward with these characters. I like that. I think that was a great idea on their part. Simplify everything. Like you just said, euthanizing him. I can't. It's funny. I hate using that because I tend to think of that in a very negative way. But it makes me smile every time I say it because of when you said it for the first time. But when they made them younger, I like that idea. I like the idea of saying that you're going to go do this, but that you're giving these things, these tools, to the creators to use as needed. I don't know that we needed the 5-year thing. I don't know that we needed that. I almost think that. In some ways, and this isn't me being critical, because I love everything they're doing, but I always think it limits the idea of saying, well, it's open, for them to grab anything that they want to. You're limiting them to saying that this happened somewhere in the 5 years. You get it? I think it's you. When you said that now, that I really haven't thought of this until you said it now. Yeah, so it doesn't bug me.
I think the 5-year rule came about because of comic book fans, and comic book fans wanted to a definite number, so they knew they had to come up with a number to calm us down and appease people, and just to okay, fine, here's the number, boom, this is how long it is. Comic storytelling is better if there is a vague sense of time, and I'm going to throw something back on the Marvel side. Magneto, one of my favorite characters of all time, especially because of his backstory. He was as a child, he survived the concentration camps, and every time they pull that into a present story, every time I've ever read, him dealing with running into a Nazi present day and just saying, hey, showing him the mark, showing him the tattoo, saying payback time, buddy. I love those moments. But if you think nowadays in 2012, a 10-year-old boy who survived the concentration camps, would that person be able to walk around? Would that person be able to be this fighting force that we see in Magneto? You start losing the believability of it just because World War II happened so long ago. It's been such a long time, but I never want to see them get rid of that part of Magneto's history. I don't want to lose that part of who he was, why he came about, what made Magneto Magneto. Whereas his first understanding and his first hatred towards humanity was seeing just this underbelly and this disgusting part of human history, having him survived it and lived through it. It's such a part of who that character is, but it's, again, part of a problem that you would have if they tried to modernize the Magneto story. Where would they go with him? What would they do with him?
And that's why I don't have a problem with them shoving this into a 5-year storyline. Or I guess the question is, then do we accept that Batman... And I think that is part of this, though. Am I wrong? Isn't the idea that Batman was operating... Was Batman operating before Superman?
Yeah, Batman was operating before Superman. Okay. He was an urban legend for multiple years, and it's just been 5 years where he's really been public, where he's really been out in the limelight.
Okay, so that does open up, I think, for Batman then to say, I guess I'll take back a little bit of what I'm saying then. Because then there's a vagueness of how long has Batman been operating as this urban legend. Because you're right, in Justice League, there is this idea that Hal Jordan knew that he was...
You're real? You exist?
Yeah. I like that better. So I'm okay with that. Because that brings that vagueness back into it. It's just 5 years of certain event, which I have no problem with thinking certain events happen in the 5-year stretch. I like the idea that maybe a Batman's been operating longer.
Oh, definitely, I think.
Yeah. It's kind of cool to talk about this now, because I'm really choosing to believe that this happened at some point. Because it doesn't contradict anything modern day, because Bruce and Selina... The relationship in this, they don't know who each other are. There's nothing in this that contradicts modern day.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a funny thing about this. There's nothing in this story. I was like, is there anything in here that really contradicts what's happening now? No, the Selina stuff really can go very well today because she doesn't know who he is in this, and he doesn't know who she is. So I know that's something that's fun. We get him back on the ledge again in this storyline, and again, it's the we're not ready yet. God hates a coward. Have I been gone so long? That I love this sense of where's my bravery? I don't know. It's you got to question yourself, do I have some cowardice now? Do I have some fear now that wasn't here? There's so many layers to what's going on with Bruce and all this every time he steps up to that ledge and questions himself. And here's the thing, what is Bruce afraid of? Is he afraid of that he can't recapture his past? Is he afraid of what happens if he does, and is that the right path for him? Is he afraid of what that means for his direction that he was thinking of retiring and becoming Bruce Wayne? There's so many different elements in there. I like seeing that. I don't necessarily need to see that all the time in Batman storytelling, because I think there is a certain element at times that's great that Bruce has a distance from us as the readers. We kind of look up to him in awe. But sometimes it's fun to bring him down to earth like this and let us get to know him, because then when you put him back up there in awe, it means something more and something different. I don't know if you feel that way about it, but for me, that's something that I really appreciated about this, that I never took away the sense that I still look up to this guy, still look at him in a different light, but yet that getting to know him a little more intimately in this is something that I really enjoyed.
It's not so much a fear of failure as a fear of success. Is he, what if he can do it? Well, what if he, it's not a, am I afraid? But what are you afraid of? Yeah, it's definitely, multiple, every time he goes up there, every time he approaches it, he's looking and he's thinking something different. It's, each time it's like, he's learning from his experiences with the Masters. He's learning who he is. And as you start getting that understanding, as your eyes start getting open, it does leave a lot of different questions, start raising. And it's, if he didn't have these thoughts, then he really would be insane. He's got the crazy cool, he's got the focus crazy, but, the fact that he's looking at this, the fact that he's asking these questions of himself does show that there is some faculties there. This isn't just a crazy man, jumping off a ledge. He's not just a thrill seeker. He's not just, adrenaline junkie. He is a man, and these are all part of the process and part of the steps that he has to take, to go, to where he needs to be.
Now, when we get to Jean-Paul, we have the sequence where he, again, is confronting somebody, and his focus is totally Leha now, which is, I think, taking him away again from the mission, because he's so focused on this and closed himself so off. What is he missing by being that heavily driven towards going after his father's killer?
He's missing the evidence, one.
Yes.
Of the fact that these guys are all saying the same thing. Dude, I don't know. And if he just stop and look and see, okay, this guy is really dead. They just, if he would have questioned the guy, where'd you get the coin, he would have found out, instead of not, assuming that it was, given to him, or he took it off pretty much a dead body. So guess what? The guy you're looking for is dead.
I do want to clarify that Bruce was doing the Matrix before the Matrix was cool. In that sequence where he's going up against the Master's guards and everything. Yeah. I loved seeing him against multiple ninjas.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Wolverine fan. And, we see a lot of this stuff with Wolverine at times. But I got, it's my longevity with Batman. I've shared many times on the show that as a kid, I grew up with Batman and Spider-Man. When I discovered the X-Men, it blew me away. Especially the Claremont stuff, the early on, that stuff just kind of, Wolverine at his core.
Yeah.
In his first miniseries, you saw lots of this kind of stuff from him. To see it with Bruce just made me go, you know what? As much as I love Logan, and sorry for any X-Men fans out there, because I am one of you, but I'm going to say Bruce is a little cooler. For me, it just so fits in this moment. And I love that I get the same chills and geek out moments from X-Men stories. I wish, at some point in time, it'd be fun to do a side cast or something like that, just sharing some favorite storylines throughout our life that are non-DC. And I don't know. The problem that Jim and I always run into with this is time, because this show requires a lot of time, and I love every minute of the time we've got here. Even look how many years it took us to get to this storyline. Really, because we've been talking about this one since year one of the podcast.
Yeah.
Of potentially doing. There was lots of times where this threw on. I remember Matthew Guy suggesting storylines like this on our forum years ago. And we intended on doing them. I remember we talked about doing them all together. Death of Superman, this, and Wonder Woman, the contest and stuff, and just never got around to it just because of time. And it's funny to be doing this now, and because I think we do it with a lot more depth than we ever would have back then. I'm glad we waited because of this. But I would love to do a Geek Out X-Men story just to, contrast this at some time, just to show people that we are fans of Marvel and just comics in general, because I think there's a lot of storylines throughout comics that I would love to do. But this one, the chills it sends up my spine when you see Bruce jumping over these cars, flipping in front of vehicles. I remember reading this issue. I was still working at Diamonds at the time, and I would go on my lunch break. There was a place on Lee Road called North Coast Nostalgia, and it was next to the movie theater there on Lee. And I remember going there, and this is where I would pick the stuff up on my lunch break. I would come back, and I would sit in my car and read these issues before my lunch break was over, because I had to read them. Yeah. And you better darn well believe these issues got read again and again and again. That's why I said, did I need to read this 3 times again? No, I just did it because I wanted to. Because I'd read it so many times that this was like in many ways what Bruce is revisiting, with his thing. This is me revisiting a lot of this. I'm like, oh my gosh. These moments where he's fighting on top of the vehicles and they're jumping from place to place, and you see him rolling under trucks, analyzing the style and telling himself, you got to stop doing this. This is, again, getting into the moment, that he talked about earlier in the issue. It was great to see everything that I was seeing in previous issues being brought back into this, knowing that every issue has different writers and they're shifting. This was something editorially and amongst the writers and, again, the art teams. I really loved seeing how, even though every issue's got different creative teams, this really has a very nice, solid flow. That it doesn't matter that it's not the same artist doing all this. These are art teams that are that are talking to editorial. I don't know who communicated with who or how this was all put together. This is very tight as a storyline goes, and there's got to be a lot of commending and patting on the back for how well these creators put this all together. Because I don't know about you, I didn't find one issue jarring where I was like, oh my gosh, look at the different art here. It never did that, especially in Knightsend. Did you have that experience, or is it just me?
Oh, no, this was definitely a flow-through. There was a lot of times when, and it's part of the thing with the trade, it really didn't hammer in the different creative teams. It didn't have, it would have the one page that would list them, but it didn't have the breakdown of the individual issues. So I really, as I'm reading this kind of flowed through. And as you get to the one scene, I could tell when a new issue began, but on one hand, I wish I would have had the covers. I wish I would have had a little bit more breakthrough between the different issues. But on the other hand, it did really mesh everything together, and it kind of had felt like a one story, one creator. Yeah, you'd see a different art style. You'd see a little bit of tweaks here, a little bit of tweaks there. But there was never any time when I'd stop and say, "Wait, what's this? Who's this?" There was no jarring. Everything. It was a nice connection. And there definitely was comparable art used out throughout the whole thing.
The obsession with Leha continues with Jean-Paul, as we see here, to the point where I think everyone around him now, including the people that he's kidnapping and getting information from, they're like sitting here going, what are you talking about? Everything's, what? And it's screaming about Leha. This sequence, again, with Bruce with the coward, because, he talks about criminals are a superstitious, cowardly lot and all that stuff. There's something about that to his whole philosophy that's brought here. I love when he's using the grill of the car as an edge, as a weapon, using his environment in a way. Because we talked about the last episode about Jean-Paul's suit, how all of these weapons were coming into play. Bruce is not needing the suit. He doesn't have the extra accoutrements. He's got that mask of Tengu, but realistically, he's got a basic ninja outfit on. He's using his entire environment as a weapon. There's no utility belt. There's no gadgets. There's no other things. This is one man using everything around him, every piece of his surroundings to his advantage. I loved seeing that in this. There's a definite distinction between the two. Jean-Paul, in order to accomplish what he did with Bane, needed all of this suit, all of these extra things to build himself into this machine of a Batman that he's created here. Bruce is recrafting himself by going back to the minimalist approach.
Yeah. And you can, part of the things that I really like seeing Bruce using his environment like this. If you think back to one of the early fights, he chastised himself for using the rock.
Yeah.
But here he's using it, and it's not a desperation move. It's not a thing. It's part of. It's not a crutch going to a device. It's just part of everything. It's, again, it is the further on in the growth of his training, the return of who he is. He always used his weapons. He used his utility belt as an accentuation to the man. This is just another prime example of that. And I love seeing when he's fighting, when he's using the environment. And especially a couple of times when he noticed how he's saying, like, there's a lot of civilians around here, a lot of innocent people on their way to work. I can't put them at risk. That's my discipline. That's my goal. That's my way. And I love seeing him, when he did use the cars, when he did use the surroundings, he was conscious of, the innocent people. He wasn't just throwing, caution into the wind and say, collateral damage. There was that consciousness in how he was using and what he was doing with.
And his opponents.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because there's a lot of assassins and killers that he's fighting, but when they come crashing off the car, he's checking the guy's pulse. Pulse is weak but steady. He's alive. Jean-Paul wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Not necessary. It's a waste of time. He'd be moving to the next mission. I love when the lady gets out of the car, it's number 6.
Yeah.
It's the next one. How cool was that? She was driving, watching this. Yeah.
He knew it was her, and that was the cool thing, because when he utilized the car and it didn't pull over, he knew, okay, this is the next one. So he knew he didn't have to worry about, her safety, worry about getting off the car, worry about, maybe she's going to panic. No, he knows exactly what's going on. It was, again, being completely aware of his surroundings. And it's the coolness that is Bruce.
I love seeing the fight sequence again because we're again seeing Bruce, no weapons, working against a weapon. But recognizing all my moves are closer to second nature. Shiva's on-the-job training is paying off if I survive. He's got this problem of reach again, which he's addressing. She's able to use this from a distance. How do I get in close to take away her advantage? But then recognizing that she's not a one-trick pony. Yeah. She's able to hit up close. I love that the masters were so diverse that we got to see different fighting styles, and each one of them was so much more effective as they were going through. And his plan, you see, I should feel good about tonight, but I don't. I just feel empty. It's, again, trying to determine what is it that I need to make myself feel connected again, to make myself feel alive again. Bruce's life has always been about what things drive him, what makes him alive. One of my favorite lines one of my favorite sequences, I should say, from Dark Knight Returns, the Frank Miller story, was when he first donned the Batsuit again, and he jumps out into the night, and the night is mine. And I'm paraphrasing all this, so this isn't direct quotes, but I remember that sense of the night is mine again, the city's mine again. He feels it all rushing up into him. It so ties into all of this and his sense of trying to reconnect with those feelings and emotions of jumping off the ledge. And that freedom and that connection with everything around him, that awareness of Gotham as a city and all that rushing up to him, those are interesting parts of what drives him. It's a part of his crazy, but it's also part of his drive and what keeps him going and what motivates him. I think we all have that drive in our life, that thing that motivates us and makes us smile and gets us excited for what we do in life. So there is that. That's where that connectability comes in, even though what he's doing is irrational. But but it is that kind of stuff that, that's where we get motivated by comics, because we do have certain things that drive us like that. I love the police find this guy first.
Yeah.
The guy that John Paul left behind.
Yeah. Dude, talk about just tortured. He's like, with the rats. He's like, don't fall asleep. And the dude's like, can't sleep. Rats will get me. Can't sleep. But
the rats turn into bats.
Yeah.
Because it's not even they just stay as rats. It's, Batman has so tormented him. This is not what Bruce would have done. But these two guys, we've got back to Dick and Tim. They've now got a camera view into what was going on. They reactivated all the stuff that Jean Paul closed off earlier when he didn't want Harold able to watch him.
Yeah.
And now they're able to watch it, and they're seeing just how nuts he really is. And for Dick Grayson to say this, I'll tell you one thing, Bruce has his work cut out for him. That to me always said a lot.
Yeah.
Because that's a guy, Dick Grayson at this point is still a veteran. And I just really loved the setup of that moment. That takes us to part 4, which is in Legends of the Dark Knight, number 62. Now, this was interesting with Legends of the Dark Knight because this was a series that realistically was usually its own title. They were rotating arcs by just great creators who came on and, were telling self-contained multi-issue Batman story arcs that can kind of be plugged in wherever you saw them kind of fitting in. They weren't stuck to the current continuity. Now, this book was crossing over in order to get this storyline out, I'm assuming, in a contained amount of time. And it was really great to get this much current Batman, because this was something that was going on. The Superman had that numbering, shield numbering, which I'm sure you probably remember at this time, where the book would continue, like if you were reading Action, it would continue into Superman, it would continue into Adventures of Superman, and then Man of Steel. I'm trying to remember the Superman titles that were coming out at the time, and I'm sorry, I'm failing horribly at that at the moment, but there were good 3 or 4 Superman books, I think 4. And then there was one in the skip week that eventually came out, Man of Steel. But Batman doing this, we would do it rarely, but it would do it for big storylines like this. It would do it for Prodigal, and then it would go back to being its own book, and then it would do it for Legacy and Contagion and stuff like that. I always liked when it did this because it was a great showcase of what really good creators and editorial, when they worked together, were capable of. And these were multiple editors even that were involved, because Legends of the Dark Knight had a different editorial team than the rest of the Bat books. And they seemed to pull this together. This crazy bit where he's opening up there, where he's screaming at St. Duma.
Yeah.
And we get to see, again, this from the Nightwing and Robin perspective. This, again, reminds me of how you've got a different creative team now, a different art team, but it really flows nicely from a different title and a different creative team from before. That's the part where I was really impressed. These first couple transition pages in each issue, to me, and we talked about this last episode in the last arc when we were talking about the book 2 of Knightfall. That impresses me how smoothly the flow was between those issues, because I think those are pivotal pages. That cliffhanger page and the opening page of a different title, because it doesn't always work this way. And I felt this really, at no point in time did I be like, well, that looks a little different, they've lost the tone. No tone was ever lost at any point in time, at least in my eyes, in a shift between these issues. And it was really apparent here, because we were left with Dick Grayson saying the things that he was talking about, and we see that from a different creative team. I'll tell you one thing. Bruce has his work cut out for him. I didn't feel anything was lost there in that sequence, seeing that from a different perspective.
Oh, no. Yeah, it's definitely was, again, really cool flow through. And I do kind of chuckle and did kind of enjoy this, the seeing the craziness that is, was Jean-Paul, and just this, where they're going with this, and just where it was slowly just building to the point where you're like, holy crud, man, this dude, it's scenes like this where I kind of started really feeling bad for the guy. And then later on when he does some fight sequences with Bruce, I'm like, he's an idiot, he's a jerk, but there is still just a level of sympathy for the crazy guy.
And that's where you can see how people would start saying, hey, I'd kind of like to read about this guy monthly. You know what I mean? You see how this is like building to that?
Oh, yeah.
It's an interesting shift from a guy who, if you had asked me before Knightsend started, I hope Batman beats him up and we never see him again, to, by the end of this, I couldn't wait for his solo series, when it came out. I read the showcase issue involving him because I wanted to know. The showcase issue was totally involving him. It was not involving Batman. But I was into him by the end of this, as far as, like you said, explore, like, where's he going to go now? What, how does it work? It was almost like Bruce passed the torch at the end to say, you can have your own book now. You've took over mine for long enough. We're back. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, with the next master, that Bruce faces. This was the guy that I was like, whoa. They had the cool lead-in. I love when they use the ninjas to lead Bruce to the next master. And he knows it's coming, he knows where it's going through, and he's bobbing and weaving, and he's fighting the ninjas and dealing with that. But just that introduction and the presence of the final master, because he's just so physically massive. And immediately, of course, Bane pops into mind, Bane mindset, and just seeing, another physical presence like Bane, where Bruce is going to be facing down another physical character, another physical challenge. And I was so glad that he was the last of the masters. He was the last of the thing to go through. And this fight sequence seemed to me to be a little bit longer, just be a little bit more beyond what the previous stuff was. And this was a sequence that I read through a couple times just because of that. It had the graduation day feel to it. It had that, this is going to be your big boss. This is going to be that fight. Get ready for it. You have to get past this guy to go beyond, and to reclaim the mantle. And I loved just how it played out, and just how even just his introduction with, the misty and the steam, and it just kind of like that mystical entrance of the guy.
Dude made the sumo diaper look stylish.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'd say it made it look stylish, because I'd be too afraid what he'd do to me if I said anything else but. That was a big guy. And to see him in comparison to Bruce, it's very often, with Bruce, we get so used to Bruce being drawn as bigger than Dick Grayson and Tim. Yeah, obviously Tim, but then Dick Grayson, in size and stature and everything. When you see him in comparison to a guy of this size with this kind of muscular build, the guy's leg. Bruce was chopping trees earlier. Those trees were smaller than this guy's leg.
Oh, definite, man. Yeah, it's you see it and you're like, okay, you got your work cut out for you on this one, dude. And you think about back to the Rocky IV references we've made before. When Rocky first faces Dolph in the ring, and Paulie goes, Rock, a lot of times I wish I was you. This ain't one of them.
Yes, it's so totally fitting right here. Yeah, Bruce should go ahead and handle that, buddy. This is where I want to be this is where I want to be Nightwing. Bruce has got his work cut out for him. Oh, that's great. Azrael, again, with his confrontations with everybody. I'm convinced at this point that this guy is a loose cannon where he's going to be interrogating innocents. If he had continued on as Batman after this, there's going to be situations where he is having verbal confrontations with innocents. He's hurting innocents because he's just a little off.
Yeah. He doesn't have the sensibility. He doesn't have the common sense. He doesn't have just the attention to detail that's needed. He's going to start questioning somebody, and they're like, "Dude, I was just walking down the street to, go to the store and get some milk," and you're like, "What were you doing?" There's going to be that regular everyday person walking down the street that he was going to think was up to no good and attack him.
This battle that Bruce has with this master that you mentioned, and where it goes from here, is my absolute favorite sequence in the whole thing. Because you see this wonderful fight. Everything that we talked about before with him recognizing at some point in time I have to come up with an exit for Shiva. Because if I don't, I will never be able to accomplish my goals. I will be dealing with this for the rest of my life. Because I have to make sure, I don't want to cross, I can't cross this line. But I've got to stop her somehow. That's the undertone that's going on in this whole fight. And when you see where this goes next in Robin, number 8, which is the next issue, it takes this fight and gives it a totally different meaning than when you read it through the first time not knowing where it's going to go. This is a brilliant writing. It's something that the 4 issues that have built to this so have led to. It's incredible pacing. It makes you forget that there's multiple creative teams working on this because it just feels like it's one writer doing this whole thing. I don't know how this was put together, but I loved this master being the one that he's going up against now because this just feels like a Bane-like master almost with his size and stature and everything. And it was really appropriate for him to be able to overtake and beat this guy and show that if Batman had been at the top of his game when he fought Bane, he would have found a way to make it work.
Yeah.
And I thought this sequence showed that to me.
Well, and also, as he's doing this, Jean Paul's fighting the armored guy, so he's got his big and bad. And I love just seeing this, the contrast in styles that they're dealing with. The one side, on the Asbat side, we got might, heavy firepower, a lot of, big booms, big bangs. On the Bruce side, we have the more disciplined fighting on both sides. Even this massive dude still had, that style to him, still had that discipline. He covered over his vocal cords because, that was a weak spot, on the throat. Bruce thinks he's got an opening, so he goes for it. No, it was a trap. It was a feint, and the guy was ready for the attack. You see the strategy. You see the style to this guy. He's not just a brute. He's not just a powerhouse. There is something upstairs. There is training and discipline. So it was a really cool contrast in each of the Batman, each of their style, each of the way they go, especially how everything plays out in the end and how each one of them deals with their threat. It was again, a really cool exploration, and detailization of who is Batman.
And the cool thing about Jean Paul's villain was very similar to what we're mentioning with Bruce, with this being this big hulking guy that can go toe-to-toe with his physical prowess right now. You've got Jean Paul with this suit of armor that we've taken to be, his edge as well. And this guy's got his own edge with his massive suit that his Jean Paul's weapons are not able to overcome them alone. He's got to come up with a clever way to overtake this guy as well. And it's funny. WrestleMania this year had John Cena and The Rock, but one of the cool things about this year's WrestleMania was this year-long build to the confrontation between the two of them, where it did a build, to this kind of thing. What they're doing in this storyline here with these two, it's a long build to the fight between Batman and Batman. And it means more because we're seeing the contrast that you're mentioning between the two. And the ending of the fight with Bruce and this guy, where Bruce has to make this decision to do the leopard blow, and a deadly blow that mimics the bite of a leopard. Skull fracture, nasal bones driven deep into the soft tissue of the brain, each finger a dagger, destroying flesh and blood vessels. And it was funny how Nightwing and Robin, in their approach to this whole thing, were coming in from the standpoint of they want to see what's going on with Bruce, what Bruce is up to from the outside. They didn't want him to know they were there. They wanted to get the uncut, unedited version, if that makes sense. Like Bruce telling them what they want to hear. They want to see what's really going on. I loved how that presented itself. And then you see that cliffhanger, and there's that sense of, it's like, there's no way Batman killed, right? There's no way. Yeah. But yet, there's that part of you, I had to wait till the next issue of this to know what happened. I thought that was great. What a cliffhanger that was.
This was one of the times when I was really glad that I was reading the trade, because I could just go into the next issue. And this trade, by the way, my first time read through was one sitting. I read it from start to finish. Just in the first time I read it through, it was after we did the last recording. I was sitting there. I'm like, let me start reading it. And I was only planning on reading a couple issues. Just kind of get the taste going, just get it going. I literally didn't get up from my seat, or a couple breaks for the bathroom and whatnot. But this was a sit through, one time read through, and in this moment, this was one of those things where I'm going along, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I'll stop here. Oh, I can't stop here. Come on. And then it just completely kept swooping through. It was like the roller coaster, building, and then the rush down. And then I'm going through and reading, and next thing I know, I was like, wow, I just read the entire thing in one sitting.
Adrian Roy did the color work throughout almost this whole thing. Digital Chameleon, I know, did the issue of Legends of Dark Knight, and I apologize if I'm leaving out any other color work that was done in this. This issue of Robin, it features, I just thought he was a great Robin artist, Tom Grummett, with Ray Crissing on finishes. Chuck Dixon did the story. I always loved the artwork on Robin during the early years of Robin. I just thought it was terrific. I loved seeing Tom Grummett. He went over to Marvel and did actually a lot of work over there in a lot of different books. I believe it was Exiles he did a run on, but then he also did a recent X-Men series that he did with Chris Claremont that I really enjoyed. So he's an artist who I end up following, and he did Titans, I believe, over for DC as well. It's a terrific artist. I really love his take on Robin. I like his Tim Drake, and I love his Bruce. I love his Batman. His Nightwing in this I thought was great. This sequence where they're confronting each other and their anger over him violating everything that they respected about him, everything that he stood for, when he's pulling the mask back on. And I really thought the pulling the mask back on was really cool. This time around, I kind of noticed it as being, he's being confronted by these two, and he can't give away what's really happening. I thought that was the reason he pulled the mask on.
Right.
Because Shiva cannot know. Shiva can see these two yelling at him. Shiva cannot know that Bruce is pulling a feint here. Because if he does reveal that to her, it ruins everything. It's almost like him pretending to hide his shame from her, but in a way also making sure there is no way she can read what he does. He keeps that mask on until she's gone. Yeah. Then it comes down, and the guy wakes up. Hey, check it out. It's alive. I so geeked out at that moment. The intensity of those pages initially and the way that all played out, but the brilliance of the plan, then you can trace it back to the beginning of all this. When he first saw that guy hanging there, you knew then that he had to come up with this exit strategy, and him knowing this was it. I had a feeling he knew at some point in time he had to do this. When he was ready for this to stop, he had to use this move, this leopard blow, the right way, his way of doing it, to make her think that he had crossed the line that she wanted him to cross. To put her, I guess at ease, that she'd accomplished one of her perverse goals.
Yeah, she wanted to taint the bat, and right here she was, she thinks she failed. She succeeded. She thinks she is, desecrated what is the mantle of the bat, and especially having these two, cutting and berating him over this. And I loved that, flow through. And it was with the mask, with him pulling his mask back up, I didn't really register until after the first read through when he pulled it up, when he put it up, when she was showing up and why he was doing it. I was like, oh, that is just, it's a nice little cool attention to detail, a little subtle thing that they don't have to throw in your face saying, this is why I did it. But when you read it through a couple times, you see that. I'm like, oh, okay, that's neat.
Yeah, and I like that kind of stuff. This was easily one of my favorite moments in the entire thing, because when you got Tim crying that, you violated this, Dick Grayson mad at him that you violated this. I thought it was very real for these two guys when they believe in everything that he does, that this would be something that for them would be very emotional. Like, you made it all a lie. For Tim, his whole life he changed to try, because of his belief in Batman and what Batman stands for. He crafted his whole life in being the Robin that could bring Batman back to being this guy and to keep Batman being this guy. Now all of a sudden to have that thrown in his face like it was, I loved that. I loved how that played out and how that made him angry.
Oh, definitely. And again, it's that moments that make me like Tim. And it was the fact that he would, and the fact that they did go at him and they did stand up to him. They didn't just, hold back. It shows who they are. It shows their strength of character, and it's character that's partially forged by Bruce. So it was one of those, kind of a proud father moments for him, because he sees his kids are honoring the way. They're not tainted by the world. They're not, twisted, or they are true to what is the true calling of the bat, what is the true code of conduct.
Now, the situation with Shiva, where she went after, the minions, I guess, of the masters, he will not be returning. I brought you a message from him. You will carry the message, little one. The game is over. The Tengu is no more. Shiva had accomplished her goal here. She had Batman kill. So I loved this little tiny attention to detail of showing why this would all stop. Not just for Bruce, but also for her, if that makes sense.
Yeah, one, it's just showing that the complete ruse worked, but two, you got to explain why she was done. She didn't start doing this for like money or anything like that. She did this for her own perverse pleasure. She had her own personal goal. She had her own, stuff she wanted out of it. Well, right here, we're seeing that she got her goal. She got what she wanted out of this, so she's done and gone. Bye-bye. Who knows where the next time she'll pop up. And that was, again, little attention to detail. Did they really need this scene in there? Probably not. Story would have been fine without it. But the fact that you get it, it's just that one more extra piece on top of it.
But I like that it was not just for her. It was a closure for the Masters. Yeah. Because I need an explanation. Why aren't they going to keep coming? And this little attention to detail shows that real quick, because we need to move on from them at this point. Because it's the next direction is for Bruce, that he has returned, and now there's only one thing missing. And I love that moment where he's standing there. He's proven enough to me. He returned, and now there's only one thing missing. And that moment was, really great.
Oh, yeah.
I like Tom Grummett's version of the Asbats costume. When you see him standing there, I don't know. I thought the artwork in this issue in particular was something that stood out for me as something I just really enjoyed. These are early issues of Robin, were my first exposure to Tom Grummett. And I remember this is nice kind of revisiting how much I really enjoyed his take on the whole Bat family and that universe at the time. It's a fitting kind of picture of an era for me that I really dug. Because this Robin book was great.
Oh, definite.
And this opening issues, especially with... I like that Tim has to juggle the fact that Dad's still around, which is something that Bruce and Dick don't have to face, but it's something that Dick points out to him, hey, at least you're able to face this, And those moments are, you have to lie to him. At least you got somebody there to lie to.
Yeah. It's a very tough thing. Oh, yeah, remember both my parents are dead. My family's dead. Oh, yeah. Complain about having your dad.
Sarah's great again in this, where she's still encouraging Jim, who it's clear she's recognizing, wow, this thing with Batman is really tormenting him. It's making him question himself, question his relationships, and I don't like what this is doing to the man that I love. And her support then, do you know something I don't about your friend? Trying to be that listening post, trying at the same time to encourage him to see all sides of the issue. She could have here again used any of these opportunities to push Jim to her agenda. She doesn't do that because she really cares about the man. It's something that I don't know. I really geeked out about that. I thought this was great character development. I grew to really love her at this point as a supporting character. Yeah, and it's,
as I'm reading through this, I'm seeing it, and I'm like, oh, okay, she's kind of cool. And again, I don't have the background. I don't have, the future stories that show what happens to her, but I'm getting enough of a glimpse of her, and actually even hearing you talk about how much you like her as a supporting and cast. I do want to see her story, and I do want to read what happens to her later on through all the different big adventures that Gotham has, and I want to see where she goes and what happens to her. And it's again, these couple trades here have really gotten me wanting to read these stories. We've been at this for 6 years now, and I've never read some of these big stories, and I never really said, I got to get that. Well, now I'm sitting there going, you know what? I got to get that. I want to read that. I want to see what happens here.
This sequence with Bruce where he shows up, let's get to work, and he's dark in the shadows. This is a great example of understanding how to create a moment. You see that, then we go back to, that's all we get, one panel. Then we go back to these sequences with Jean-Paul. And I'm like, wait, we're doing what now? No.
Go back.
I mean, and in perfect sequences. They're great sequences. No arguing, because, we see this guy, again, going over the edge, searching for Leha, keeping us going with this. Then we see this sequence with the bats. And we see a character we haven't seen in a while who is supposed to be catatonic and Bane. Those bats coming in and tormenting him, with him going, he has returned. He knew at that moment what we were going to see in those panels afterwards, and so perfect to see how this is tormenting Bane. And it's been a long time, way long. And we see him finally in the suit. I remember this moment like it was yesterday, because it had been, for us as readers, a long time since we had seen this. It's different to see him in stories like in Legends of the Dark Knight and stuff like that that's, out of continuity. It's another thing to see him don this. And boy, did Tom Grummett do a great job on that last page. And the whole art team. I got to give credit to the whole art team. Colorist, Ray Crissing. This is, woo. Wow, did that come out looking great. Because you see the two behind, Dick Grayson looking there with a strong admiration. And Tim, having that childlike kind of, I'm so connected with that childlike kind of, yeah, this is cool. Smile on his face. I loved where this ended right here. This is a page for me that will go down as one of my fond memories of Batman. Because he just looks great here. I love the way the cape does that points on the shoulders thing. It's one of those styles of Bat costumes. I love the variations over the years. This one just worked. Totally worked in this sequence to see him come back and look like this in this moment. Got me so excited to read more. This is the halfway point of the storyline that we were so looking forward to seeing where it was going to go. And it leads into then Catwoman afterwards, which has more great artwork. But I really needed this at this point. This isn't even getting to the good part.
Yeah, we still haven't gotten... This is just the build-up to it. This is the getting the setup for the fight.
Wait, no, I'm not talking about the fight, dude. Here's what I'm saying. I'm talking about the good part of his return.
Right.
This next issue, and I don't mean to discount anything you're saying right there. I don't mean it this way. What I'm saying is, we go into this Catwoman issue, we're going back to the doggone rooftop again, and we're finally seeing this moment. And oh my gosh, did that pay off? I'm sorry, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to continue on, man. You and I are on the same page here.
This moment where he throws that thing, and then we see this 2-page spread. The traffic noise rushes up to meet him, the lights of the city like countless stars, and he knows each one. This is his universe. All of a sudden, he knows. He knows. That's a page that fond memories of that. It holds up today. This is what Batman's all about for me. There is a time, sometimes his world gets so dark that we forget that this is one of those pages that made me want to be Batman. That rush that he gets there. This is when I was a kid and you'd throw on a towel or whatever, pretending that it was your cape or a blanket, running around your neighborhood and stuff like that. This made me want, rereading this again, made me want to do this around my neighborhood.
Come on, you did.
No, I wanted to. I didn't. Because I was rereading this at 1 in the morning or something.
Well, the perfect time to run around.
Yeah. My wife would have
stop you. Hey, what you doing? I'm Batman.
This would have been one of those times where my wife would have been like, my wife would have been like, I'm changing the locks. But it's all come back to him. The strength, the conviction, the skill, the shadowed alleys in the dark street, the endless nights one after another. They're all his. They always will be. This would have no meaning if it wasn't for the great issues leading up to this. Then add on to that, compound onto that, everything, the amount of time the character's been away. This is how you return a character. Mm-hmm. This is a masterclass in how you return a character in these issues. They took him down for a long time, and they brought him back in a way. This issue, incredibly satisfying, but again, means nothing if it hasn't been for the build to this. I so loved that.
Oh, amen. And it was neat because with the visual treats you're talking about and just how everything was playing out. And I'm sitting here, I got the da 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 da, the Batman theme going through my head as I'm reading this. And then I even the second and third read through, I started looking, at the landscape and just everything going on. And you kind of see the one newspaper kind of fluttering in the wind that shows Dixon wins the Golden Luge and Buzz wins silver. And it was this little kind of little things thrown out there that kind of made me chuckle, little bits and pieces, but it never took away from the coolness and the majesty. And just seeing him stand and perched, that side profile Batman perch when he's on the one gargoyle that he's jumped from. I was just like, yes, this is the cool stuff. This is the groove, man. I was really just like, it was a pump, it gets you excited. The opening, the setup is, how we mentioned with him first appearing in that Robin issue, and then we go into this, and then boom, 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 boom. It was just, this right here was just a great pacing, a great way to get you jumping and get you excited and get you pumped and ready for his first confrontation, his first dealings with the public, his first, his return. How is it going to play out? Where is it going to come from? What's going to happen here?
Now, this Catwoman that's in this sequence of events, I hope, I don't know if it comes across in this issue, and I'm hoping it kind of does for you, why I reference this series when I talk about the current one. The tone and the feel of this Catwoman here, being like a precursor to the one we're currently reading now. Because there's definitely more of a villain aspect to her now, but yet there is still that sense of, I'm going to protect my friends, I'm going to do that. 'Cause she's searching for the cybernetic enabler to help one of her friends.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I loved this series. I have fond memories of, the Catwoman mini before this series, and then, of course, the more recent series of Catwoman, and then the current one, actually. So we've got multiple volumes of Catwoman now. This is one, though, I think you can see a little bit more with this version of the character, how very much the current series is reminiscent of classic Catwoman.
Yeah. Oh, definitely get that kind of vibe. And one thing I do want to know, just for my own personal thing, did she ever get the tech? We see in this issue that he throws it off the side of the bridge, but does she eventually get that piece of tech for her friend, or what happens there? Do you remember?
Oh boy, I'm almost positive she did, because I thought this led to, the next issue she dove afterward it.
Oh, okay.
So I think she does get it. Yeah, she does. The cat burglar does end up pulling this off at the end. So
okay, because I didn't know if she dies for it or Bruce recognizes that she needs it for something else, or I didn't know if this kind of led to the beginning of the relationship, the association between Bruce and Selina.
No, they had the association here that you end up seeing in this storyline, but there was her diving after it in one of her issues afterwards.
Oh, okay.
It actually is the next issue of Catwoman, I'm almost positive, where she does that. So that's been a long time since I've read that series, but I do remember her being the one to resolve that.
Yeah, and I did like seeing Jean-Paul's driving skills kind of match my own, where he's just smashing through the cars and no concern whatsoever with the people on the road, just going straight for it. This is where I got to go. And you see, again, he's putting innocent lives in danger, and he's not even thinking. It's not even registering his brain. He's only focused on getting Lehigh. He's only focused on vengeance, on revenge, on taking this guy down, who's already been taken down.
I love the adventure aspect of Catwoman in this. I loved this take on Selina, where you get to see she's totally a criminal still, but you can tell that she will care for her own. When she is captured in that wheelchair and she's stuck in that elevator, and Rolling Stone spoiler warning, yuck, or whatever she said. This series was one that I have very, very, especially in the early run of it, I have very, very fond memories of this series. I thought the artwork was very beautiful. It was a sleek and sexy Selina, while at the same time not going too far with that. It certainly was a book that clearly was at the time an answer to the Bad Girl books at the time, but never lost the fact that this is Catwoman. She's a cat burglar. There's something intelligent to her, and there's a craftiness to her. It separated her from, though, like a Wonder Woman, and those types of characters, and Birds of Prey, and that kind of stuff that would come. Birds of Prey, I believe, came after this. But it was a separation from those type of characters. I know Birds of Prey came after this, actually, as a matter of fact. But it was a separation from that kind of thing, which I really enjoyed the distinction. I love that we see this is where the storylines start to converge, because they're all after Selkirk.
Yeah.
You know, Bruce is after Jean-Paul. Selina is after Selkirk for her own reasons, obviously, because she wants this cybernetic enabler. But when they get to that point, because this whole Liha thing, Jean-Paul's ready to kill him. And Bruce is like, no. This is a murderer, a killer. And, you know, the Selkirk is not a nice guy. But Bruce is not allowing that crossing of the line. And this leads to that end-of-the-moment confrontation we've been wanting to see.
Yeah.
Bruce, not the guy that in the issue before this storyline kicked off got thrown around by Jean-Paul, because Jean-Paul's going to reference that. Mm-hmm. This isn't the guy that was shoved. This is a very different man. And that was such a geek-out moment. 6 issues in, at the end, we're finally getting the start of the confrontation that's going to lead into the next 4 issues of this series.
Oh, God, yeah. And it's the power and presence of Bruce in this final issue as well as the opening page of the next one. You see just, you know, physically who he is. You see the intense, just that determination. But I loved seeing in the backdrop that you had Dick Grayson and Tim Drake right there with them. The 2 sons are ready. It's the full family is present, up front and accounted for. And that, for me, was you couldn't have just had Bruce there by himself. You needed the other 2 present. You needed the other 2 there. Does he need them to fight his battles? No. But it's a standing, you know, we're standing together. It's the solidarity of the Bat family.
Now I can get out of here.
All right, Jim, this is it. We're going into Batman 510. And this is, like you mentioned, this is the kickoff to what happened at the end of last issue. And who's going to end it now that you're retired? Consider this a comeback. This was a roller coaster that once this sequence of events kicked off, it's like a blur how fast this action's going. This is it, Nightwing. It's going down. Was so totally what Tim was saying here at this moment. I'm like, yes. I'm so totally with it at this point. Forget about what Nightwing's saying as far as reasoning with it. No, there's no reasoning with it at this point. Let's get to the battle. This is what I want to see. And what I loved about this one was this took 4 issues. It kicks off here, and it goes through 4 issues. There's no like compressing this battle. This went on with every torment, everything we've seen with Jean-Paul, everything we've seen with Bruce, everything we've seen from the past. This is a battle for who is going to have the mantle in Gotham. Every supporting cast player from the police straight on through to Catwoman to Nightwing and Robin are all dealt with in relation to this, to the villains that have been set up in this piece who can't just sit back and watch. Jean-Paul is still going after Liha.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's not giving that up because he's fighting Bruce. He's not going to let that man escape, regardless of his battle with Bruce. We have this sequence. I loved what was going on with Catwoman and Nightwing and Robin, where it's clear that these guys, stay out of this. I don't need or want your help. But for me, the best part was when you start seeing Bruce and Jean-Paul fight. Bruce talking about, Jean-Paul talking about the costume is both armor and weapon. What do you rely on? And Bruce is like, and we saw this in the training, whatever happens to be at hand, as he's using all of the door, what was that, the doorway or the windows or whatever, for the sliding glass doors to the balcony, as a way to gain an upper hand to get a punch in. He's going toe-to-toe with this guy with the armor, using his environment and using, the balcony and using the height and using momentum and speed against a guy who has superior strength and power due to the suit and what it's bringing to the table for him. That was something that I thought was really a neat way to showcase how to do a battle between 2 heroes.
Oh, God, yeah. And it was neat seeing the player, it wasn't just about a physical beatdown for Bruce. He was trying to reach him, even from the very beginning when he talks about Abator and how the innocent person died, and he's just laying down the line saying, he's like, even when John Paul's like, hey, I didn't kill him, I just walked away. He's like, yeah, but because of that guy died, because that innocent died. The true Batman doesn't kill. He doesn't let that happen. And I love seeing how just throughout this whole fight, it's not just about the physical beatdown. Bruce is trying to reach him. And even Dick makes a reference to it, when he and Tim are talking about, here it is, this is it, it's going down. And Dick's like, well, hold on. Maybe Bruce can talk him down. Bruce is going to try to reach him, try to rational with him. It's not just about the physical beatdown for Bruce. He wants to help John Paul. He wants to save him. He wants to do the right thing because he is a hero. That is what Batman does. That is who the Batman is. And I'd love seeing that throughout this whole thing where it was about trying to reach the man inside the costume.
Well, the other thing I like, too, is, this is somebody that Bruce handed the mantle to. He was ready to retire and give this to this guy. He's got to believe that somewhere in there is the man that he saw that he was willing to give it to.
Yeah.
So, you'll see him actually wrestle with that during the storyline, where he hits that point where he finally says to him, boy, I didn't want to believe it. Get a little off. And it's such a great part about this whole thing.
One of the Dick Grayson Nightwing Robin moments that I really chuckled at, and it was cool within the story, but it was, again, a second, third read-through that I really saw it. It was when, they're dealing with the mob guys and they're being shot at, and Nightwing just kind of takes it overdrive mode, and, the bad guys are shooting, he goes, nobody shoots in my direction. He's kind of got that rage, and he's going on the offensives, and you see Robin in the background go, ditto, I guess, as he's laying down for cover. I was like, again, a moment I want to be Robin instead of Nightwing. He's smart. He's laying down. He's staying out of the line of fire.
Well, it's funny. And it was a Robin, too. You got to remember the experience of Tim here is a lot different than the experience of Nightwing at this point. The Commissioner Gordon, Mayor Kroll debate. I love that at this point we're really clear that Commissioner Gordon knows that Jean Paul is not the real Batman.
Yeah.
He almost reveals it to Kroll, but because he's called to the actual battle that's going on, he never gets a chance to reveal to Kroll his suspicions that this isn't the real Batman. And this is actually going to be his first opportunity during this battle to find out that, he's 100% correct. And still questioning things from it. This is a pivotal, and I think you can see it in this sequence and then building in the way the rest of the storyline goes. This is a storyline that will change the status quo of Jim Gordon and Bruce, just like it did Alfred and Bruce for a while. Because we go from this to Bruce and what happens with him at the end of the storyline into then, like you said, Prodigal, where it's going to be very clear. We've seen the visuals of how Nightwing compares to Bruce, physical build-wise.
Yeah.
So that's something that Gordon's going to notice right away. So now we've gone to Asbats, to this other one, and we'll eventually go back to Bruce, but Gordon's going to be questioning all of this now. How long has this been going on? And did anything I ever, every time I believed that it was really Batman I was encountering, was it different people all the time?
Again, I'm glad, that's one of the scenes I do remember, or I've either heard or people have talked about, from Prodigal, is that first dealings with, Dick Grayson, Batman with Gordon. And Gordon even, I remember, Gordon calls him out on it, saying, hey, you're like half a foot taller and this, and starts listing the physical differences between Nightwing, Dick Grayson and Bruce Wayne. And I love just the fact that, again, it's showing that he isn't an idiot. He's not a stupid cop. He does have intelligence. He is a good detective in his own right. So that's something I was always glad whenever they play it up at. And again, seeing these layouts, seeing how this battle goes down, I understand why Bruce won, why Bruce does still need to get away, why he needed to do this, but why he needs his time off. And it's got me excited to read Prodigal. And I heard it was a cool story when Dick Grayson was in the, was Batman for a while there. I thought about getting Prodigal, but I never actually purchased it. I never picked it up. Now I'm sitting here saying I'm going to get this, whether it's in Chicago or whether I get it through in-stock trades. Not sure where I'm going to buy it or how I'm going to, but I will have Prodigal in my hand very soon.
Now, this sequence with Jean Paul and Bruce, this was one of those parts where I started thinking to myself, Jean Paul in this sequence is a lot more like Bane in the way that he's reacting to Bruce in this.
Yeah.
You're nothing but a pretender now, already finished. But even if you were still in your prime, still a real threat, you can't hurt me. And you're not in your prime, and you're no threat at all. The way he's carrying himself in that battle is, to me, very reminiscent of, I don't know if you're feeling that same connection, but for me, it was definitely a connection with Bane and how Bane was presenting himself.
Oh, big time. And even just like the Bane and Jean-Paul fight and just everything, where it was playing out. And something I also noticed as the fight's going on, how the blue paint is slowly coming off of the Bat costume. And it was weird because when I first read through this, I initially thought it was blood, and then I didn't realize what was going on. It took me a while to realize that when Jean-Paul made the Bat costume, he didn't make it in the Bat colors. He made it in the Azrael colors and then painted it blue and painted it, to look like a Bat costume. And that's something, again, I had no idea, no understanding that he actually did it that way. And it was kind of a cool, once I had that revelation, like, oh, okay, that's why this played out. I get you now.
And that's why it's called the Asbat's costume.
Right.
Because even the cape and the way that it's made, his version of the cape is reminiscent of the Azrael costume. So it's a nice little hybrid twist of how all that works. During this battle, we have Nightwing and Tim continuing their investigation, and this is all dealing with, again, the thugs associated with Selkirk. That Selkirk storyline is still going on. And I remember when I was reading this again, I had to keep reminding myself, like, oh, yeah, this Selkirk thing is still going on with Selina chasing him, because it's, the Catwoman issue. This is a major storyline for her. And I loved how Dick Grayson and Nightwing were, Dick Grayson and Tim were brought into that as well and not ignored. That's, again, a great example of pacing. But then this helicopter sequence where Azrael, because he has to chase after Selkirk, is kind of going after them as well. And then, but was Bruce. See, I always thought it was Azrael that shot after there to go after Selkirk. But it wasn't. Azrael was using his claw for a certain reason. Bruce saw an advantage to using. See, I took it that Bruce deliberately was firing at the helicopter. Am I right? Because he spoiled the aim?
Yeah, Bruce threw off the aim.
Did he do it on purpose at the helicopter?
Hold on, let me looking again.
Because they end up going with the helicopter, which would put them in line with Selkirk. Did he do that on purpose, or was that a happy accident, or what happened there?
I think what it was is Bruce threw off the aim so that he didn't crash the helicopter. Azrael was going to crash the helicopter. Bruce made it so they didn't crash.
Huh. Well, but they're getting shot at. So, because Bruce makes give it up Jean-Paul. First time I went back to Jean-Paul this episode. Give it up, Jean-Paul. I can't shield myself with your armor forever. And he's like, then die. Not when your grapnel can save us both. So, am I right that you shoot from that to know you spoiled the aim? He clicks it there, right? You see with his hands, he's moving him into position. Bruce did that on purpose so they couldn't be shot at, right?
Yeah, Bruce did the grappling to stop him.
How awesome was that? And then you're left with these two in the cliffhanger. Both Batman with Bullock watching.
Yeah.
Being dragged along by this helicopter. What a great cliffhanger ending this one was. This did not miss a beat in these last 4 parts. Because it's just one cliffhanger after another, one intense situation after another of these two trying to fight with the environment around them not cooperating. and I keep referencing so many great moments. This does lead to a bridge moment, which I know you're not fond of bridges, but it led to a great bridge moment where I thought we got to see Batman being Batman. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, see, you're seeing why Jim doesn't like bridges. Look at all this that can happen here. These people are just driving across the bridge, just doing their normal, everyday life, and a helicopter crashes on it. And how many cars are flipped and turned and banged up. This is why bridges are dangerous and they should be outlawed. what they should have done is have this like right up against the water, really low to the ground, so if anything happens, it's a safe fall. But no, they have to have this big booming span thing that helicopters can crash into, and cars and whatnot can cause all sorts of chaos. This right here is proving that my irrational fear is very rational. How many times in a comic do we get something like this? How many times do we get bridges and that are used as part of a cliffhanging major event or a big catastrophic challenge to the hero? Right here, I think I'm very justified in every fear I have.
Where are these turned over cars you're mentioning?
I don't know. I'm in the groove. Just let me go.
I'm just looking at what you're saying. Saying, yes, you can see all these turned over cars. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Later on, there's all types of crashes and bangs and cars blowing up and whatnot.
But it wasn't because they were on a bridge.
Well, they're on the bridge that has the helicopter crash.
But that could have been the helicopter crash anywhere. It had nothing to do with being on a bridge.
No, bridges are evil. They attract attention like this.
You think people deserved it because they were on the bridge to begin with?
I don't think the people deserve it. I think the building deserves it. The structure itself is evil.
So you wish harm on bridges? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I do.
Do you have like bridge voodoo dolls and things like that? Do you start like poking it? Are you the reason why our bridge in Cleveland is never going to be finished?
No, that's just good fortune on my part.
That's just lucky.
I gotta have at least one moment of luck in my life. There it is.
One of the things I loved in this sequence was we see Bruce immediately when he saves Catwoman's life. And then immediately rushes to the aid of any of the people that could possibly be hurt at this point. Lets John Paul kind of go off and do his thing while he is being Batman. And that was something where, again, the distinction in how we operate. This is what makes him the one true Batman. The fact that he will, in the middle of the battle, do these things that we saw him do this when Arkham people were released, things like that. This is what Bane noticed. This is what this guy is. When he came back, he hasn't lost any of the moral code of conduct that has made him Batman.
Yeah, and same is said about with Nightwing and Robin. They're also swooping in. They had that moment of concern, like how is the boss going to survive this? But they do have to deal with civilians first, protect the innocent, and they're also in the groove and helping people. And I loved seeing everything you said about Bruce. He's got to do this. This is what he's got to, he's not just focused on, catching the bad guy. He's focused on saving the innocent lives. This is what a hero does. But then again, you see it in his kids. You see it in his sons having that same moral code. And they're not, there's no question. There's no hesitation. They take down the bad guy shooting, but then they help the people. It was a really cool, again, exploration of what a hero is supposed to do, how they're supposed to act.
If the tingle she felt the first time she'd seen him left her in any doubt, it fades now. The man in the metal costume would never risk his life for scum. She knows the real Batman is back. That's a distinction, too. It's a foe of Batman who knows it's him. But it also shows the relationship that she has with him, where there are those moments where there's that feeling that she has between him. I love that when the helicopter explodes, he narrowly escapes, saving one of, again, the criminals.
Yep.
Just such a great part of all this.
Well, and even gets her in on the action of helping the bad guys. The people that she hates, the people that she's, she has no invested purpose or invested reason to help these guys, but it's Bruce who's there saying, hey, you saw it this far, see it through.
Which was great, and that she went ahead and paid attention to it as well.
Yeah.
The Batmobile sequence was another one of those just great moments in this, because he enters the code knowing that there's a possibility of, the code being changed and stuff like that. Robin knowing so much about the booby traps, trying to warn Bruce. Jean Paul standing there. Now we see him back in the Azrael colors. He never should have crossed the punishing angel. Now he has proved with his life there is only one true Batman.
Yeah.
And another great ending. And the intensity of this, wondering what was going to happen in the next issue, was something I vividly remember. Because my thinking was, did Robin's warning get there in time? You know, I mean, obviously not going to kill Bruce.
You knew they didn't kill him off.
Yeah.
You knew he was fine. The question is, how did he get out?
Yes.
What did he do? What was the way he survived it? And it was cool because for me, I like seeing that explosion. I like seeing how the full-on costume was back. But then next issue, that opening panel of just Dick Grayson's rage. I ate that up. I was like, yes, I was so glad to see that, just that primal reaction, that guttural reaction, like, you killed him! That was a cool moment. That was a great, continuation.
And that leads to that 2-page spread of him. You could never be the Batman. Robin being away at that moment, away from Dick, left up this situation where we get to see Dick Grayson have a moment to go one-on-one with Jean-Paul. And I wanted to see this.
Yeah.
I wanted to see the true son battling against the wrongly chosen son. This actually reminded me of Rocky V a little bit, with Tommy Gunn.
Yeah.
Kind of the real son kind of going back after Tommy Gunn. I was glad to see Robin get a chance, too, to save the baby. Even though he's, thinks Bruce is dead at this point, he's still being Robin. He's still, taking that moment to save the kid and to keep the whole mythos going. Hasn't had time to process everything and make a decision on what to do. Focused on Nightwing then when Batman shows up back on the scene. Just seeing the two of them running together was a geek out for me.
Yeah.
Because this is our first real chance to see Batman and Robin together again. Him knowing that was what Jean-Paul would do, because that's what he would do.
Would have done, yeah.
Even though he wouldn't have done it as lethal.
Well, yeah, and Bruce would have done it his style and his own way, but I like the fact that, one, you get that cool moment of them, but Bruce does trust that Dick Grayson can handle himself. He knows that Nightwing is his own man, and, because even when, Tim's like, hey, we got to help out Nightwing, he's like, no. He can handle himself. He knows he knows when to pull back. He knows when to fall, to cut off the attack. I love seeing that again, the Bat family working together. They know what they need to do, how they need to do it, and they know to trust each other.
Yeah. And that actually shows something that I don't think Dick Grayson gets to see very often. Bruce's confidence in him.
Yeah.
Which, again, this is his chosen son. So it wasn't that he wasn't passing the torch on to Dick because he didn't believe he could handle it. It really was exactly, this verifies what Bruce said. Now, here's the thing. Montoya's asking what's going on. Like, Harvey doesn't even know how to really respond to her, right?
Yeah.
Because he's saying just keep the gawkers off the bridge. And it looks like costume geeks are fighting to see who gets to be Gotham's #1 masked man. And this adds another sense of Harvey doesn't know who to believe is Batman at this point, right?
Yeah, he was kind of backing as Bats. He liked the harder edge, but he's now seeing the traditional costume going, wait a minute, has this not been the guy? Because he took it as that it was Batman got a little bit knocked around a little bit, and came back tougher and realized he needed to kick it up a notch. Well, now he's seeing, hey, that guy the whole time wasn't the Batman. Who was that guy? And so he didn't know where to throw his loyalty. He didn't know who to trust, who to believe. So it's kind of he couldn't really express himself because he's not he's not a talker. He's more of a doer. So I love seeing his little confusion, him throwing out a little kind of a joke in there just to cover his uncomfortableness, and just the fact that he couldn't express himself correctly.
This battle on the boat between Dick Grayson and Jean-Paul, where we see that like Dick Grayson's convinced Bruce is dead, but we got comedy moments here that are like really appropriate because we know at this point what Dick doesn't know, that Bruce is just fine. And this is the biggest pot of my life, the best hand I ever held. This would never happen in St. Louis. And then you get this lady. No way. I've been playing this bandit all day long, the slot machine, and he's getting ready to pay big. You got this battle going on? I'm sorry. I don't care how long I've been playing the slot machine. I'm going.
Well, here's the thing. You know what? That lady kind of reminded me of my mom. Because I could see my mom doing something like that going, I really don't want to leave this machine. It's paying out.
But I see your mom, if this kind of crazy nonsense is going on, she's gone. I don't see her hugging the machine.
See, you've never seen her in Vegas, man.
But has this type of violence ever happened right directly next to her in Vegas?
This type of violence has never happened, in Vegas while we were there. But when Mom gets going, when she's got the look in her eye, when the wheels are flashing and the numbers are going and there's a lot of the bells and whistles and binging, she's focused. She's in the zone. She's right there in that moment. I could probably walk up to her, have a conversation, and she wouldn't even notice I was there when she's completely focused on this. I think as this whole fight is going on, Mom probably wouldn't have noticed it going on. She would have been so focused on the machine. Now, my dad, on the other hand, would be pulling on her going, let's get out of here now. And she'd just be like, not now, hold on. One more spin, Bill, one more spin.
Now, do you see her being the type that would, scold them and tell them to stop so she can finish playing her game at least? I don't see her hugging the machine like this lady was. That doesn't seem like... That's not your mom to me. I see your mom maybe telling them, maybe if you guys would stop fighting around me, I could finish playing my game.
Yeah, see, I could see Mom would tell them more, excuse me, I'm in the middle of a game here. Right. Do you mind taking this elsewhere?
See, I see her scolding them, trying to make right on what they're doing.
Yeah, telling them to stop, and that's. But it would take a bit for them to get her attention. The initial coming through the wall probably wouldn't get Mom's attention. Though I say this, I can throw myself under the bus because we're at the one casino, and overhead they have a high wire act sort of going on where people are flipping and spinning and doing all sorts of neat acrobatic stuff. I was at the dice table when the act is going on over my head. I didn't notice the act.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, we were so focused on the game and we were shooting. Afterwards, Mom's like, hey, what'd you think of the show? And I go, what show? The one that was happening over your head? I'm like, oh, I didn't notice it. So I have a little bit of that as well, where it's the focused mind going on.
Now, after the battle ends between Nightwing and Azrael goes back to the Batcave, I loved how that played out. Because one of the cool things about that was the alarms were tripped. Bruce is now at home, and he's using his home, instead of to Azrael's advantage, to his own advantage.
Yeah.
And I loved seeing that kind of distinction, that kind of shift with everything before we get into the big final, and the issue's actually called Climax in Legends of the Dark Knight number 63. Because this really is the final fight between these two. And I loved how this issue played out, because it wasn't at all what I expected. Because I was expecting a throwdown where Bruce would actually beat him and you get arrested or something. I didn't know how it was going to go on that end. Maybe this would be a way to clear his name a little bit or something. I didn't expect it to end the way it did. A great artwork here by Barry Kitson with the inker Scott Hanna. Colorist on this one was Digital Chameleon. This issue was written actually by Denny O'Neil. The letterer was Willie Schubert. Assistant editor was Chuck Kim. Associate editor is Jim Spivey. And the editor was Archie Goodwin, the great Archie Goodwin. So, I don't know. This is it was an interesting opening to an issue. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
Well, I was actually going to agree with you on the first time I read this through. I was shocked and surprised by the ending. I was expecting, and it wasn't even expecting a beatdown. I was expecting something different. I was expecting, an arrest or containment or just something. And seeing just how Bruce played him and dealt with this was a psychological victory for Bruce, not just a physical beatdown. And it threw me for a loop. And it wasn't until a second or third read through that I really, got my grasp on what Bruce did and how he did it, and where this is something that from the very beginning of the fight, you see Bruce trying to reach, the man, trying to get beyond the system, try to get beyond Azrael and actually reach that person that he thought could be his replacement, who he thought could continue on the mantle of the Bat. And I loved seeing the fact that Bruce never gave up on reaching the man. He actually went through and then even accomplished the goal of actually pulling him out and getting him to the surface again. Which
I really loved. I like that sense of he has to really reach the man, because if you keep trying to go to toe-to-toe with this suit, that's not the way he's going to win this battle. He won it in a thinking man's way.
Yeah.
And that was something that stood out. One of the things I want to note, in previous issues leading up to this, Wayne Manor really got neglected and let go and destroyed. Windows were broken and stuff like that. And the reason why was John Paul was not concerned with the Bruce Wayne side of being Batman. Yeah. He was totally consumed with being Batman, so he was in the cave. The reason why this place looks so clean right now, before Alfred's final act, before he left, was to come back and clean up Wayne Manor one last time.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, again, that's... Yeah, I had no idea Alfred wasn't around throughout all this, and to be honest, I hadn't really completely noticed the state of Wayne Manor before or anything like that, and I'm glad that they had a little attention to detail like that they did show that one more time.
And it was this. I'm sorry. This happened. Alfred came back right before Knightsend.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't something that you would have seen in this.
Right.
It was something you would have seen in Knight's Quest. That Alfred came back, and one of his last acts was to clean this up. But just so people know, Jean Paul was not hanging out upstairs. He was hanging out down below exclusively. The upstairs just happened to be there.
Yeah.
So I like this little history lesson of Bruce having the secret way into the cave because he knew about the booby traps and stuff. I love that he created the clock and knew how to open it even though it had been changed. Expected the booby traps, recognizing there was going to be more. And is that the best way to go? So instead he goes back to this thing from a kid. And I got to wonder if Batman Begins didn't pull this sequence from here.
Yeah, well, that was something I wanted to know, if this whole thing was part of Bat lore, Bat legend has always been a piece of it. Because, as soon as I saw this scene, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, Batman Begins. But I didn't know if they always had this sequence where that's when he first sees the cave, when he falls in, and if that's always been a part of it. Because I don't remember. I don't know. I remember seeing this in other mediums, but I never know which came first.
There's been a lot of stories that have talked about his discovery of the cave. I think it's evolved and expanded over time. So I think it's a little bit of A and B. I think that this takes little bits and tidbits from all kinds of different storytelling versions of all this. Mm-hmm. I just like that he would know a certain area of the cave better than Jean Paul, and that this particular interest is going to be pivotal to the concluding of the storyline.
Yeah, and again, it's still, everything's playing out. It's the psychological, how he was able to get into his cave. It's not Jean Paul's cave, it's Bruce's cave. He knows where to do and how to deal with this. They're done. He's done with the physical beatdown. And I love just the whole, as everything's playing out, as they're having their dialogue, as, at first I was thinking maybe this is going to be a psychological warfare leading to another fight sequence, but and that's why when it didn't go that way, I was kind of like surprised. But I really like how this played out better. The big difference between Bruce and Jean Paul is the intelligence, is the strategy, is the style that is Batman. It's not just, it is of course the killing code, but it is this, Bruce brought something more to the table than just physical prowess and physical fighting. There, and we're right here. We're seeing that. We're seeing why Bruce, Wayne needs to be Batman. Why Batman has to be the greatest detective of all time. It's not just about a human who conditioned his body to be a fighting machine. It's so much more to him.
This is an important sequence because when we see Bruce go down there and finally start confronting Azrael and using kind of Azrael's use of the system, or his visions against him, Bruce says something. He goes, St. Duma is dead. Your father is dead. It's time to free yourself from them and of the Batman. There is no Batman. Batman is a fiction. Bruce going into this mode where he's saying, did he say that? Can it possibly be true? For years he believed that Batman was the truth. Bruce Wayne was the fiction. In this moment, we see him kind of beginning to heal himself in some ways because he was having trouble resolving who he was, what his life was, leading up to Knightfall. Now we've got a guy who's realizing, wait a minute, what I told Jean Paul's correct. I created Batman. Who am I? I am Bruce Wayne. That makes him the true Batman. That makes him Batman. But until, he actually can face that to himself, it's hard to get and convince Jean Paul that that's what's really happening here.
Yeah, and it's there's always the big debate that Batman fans have about who is the real persona. Is Batman Bruce's true persona, or is it Bruce Wayne, or is it an amalgamation between the two? And this sequence right here is saying, flat out that he is Bruce Wayne. He, what he does is he becomes Batman, but in his heart and in his soul, he has to be who he is. He has to be Bruce Wayne. And it was a kind of a cool, moment for him, as well as for, me as I'm reading and saying, yeah, this is the guy. This is the man. This is what he is. He has to do these other stuff to get the job done and get the job done right. But in the end, when everything is said and done, Bruce Wayne is the man. That is the character. That is the persona. That is the person.
Now he has a sequence where, Jean Paul now is lashing out and saying, I will be nothing if I'm not Batman. I am Batman. I will not be nothing. And no matter what Bruce is throwing at him, Bruce is realizing, I've got to get him out of that suit. I've got to try and connect with this guy and get to his mind before there is no way to even reach it. The whole night vision lenses thing is something I loved how this played out with them crawling in the hole, kind of Bruce going back to his roots and using this thing as a child that had started him down this path and taking Jean-Paul Valley through it and making him experience it and then blinding him with the light and forcing him to see himself as Batman in that light. Without the suit, everything stripped away, recognizing that he is nothing. That's the path. That's where he's left at the end of this. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know what his identity is. He's not Azrael. He's not Batman. Then who is he? What is he?
Yeah, and it was weird because this was, again, when I first read this, he kind of just leaves him off to dry and leaves him out to hang. And I wanted to see Bruce take this person that he had completely defeated under his wing and start, working with him and helping him and be the mentor that he couldn't be before. And it was weird. I wanted to see this redemption of Jean Paul, and I wanted to see, him actually show that he is a decent person. And I don't know. Every time I read this, I always have a different reaction, and I kind of have this moment like, Bruce, are you dropping the ball here?
I think he's seeing that he dropped the ball by putting him in this role, by assuming he was in a position to do it when he wasn't ready.
Yeah.
And I think there's a certain amount of responsibility that Bruce is taking upon himself for rushing this guy without fully knowing everything. It says, a long time ago, I fell through that opening. I haven't really ever stopped falling. Maybe it's time to go the other way. Time for both of us to leave the dark. You were wrong when you said you're nothing. You just don't know who you are, what you might become. This is something Bruce has experienced recently. But you can learn. It won't be easy, and you might fail, but you've got to try. And, he talks about forgiving himself, meaning Bruce forgiving himself for allowing a lot of this to happen. It's just something that really wow. It's a destiny that he's determined to return to, but not tonight. And for him to walk away from that destiny for one night and just kind of say, all right, I've done this for now. I need to step away for a second, I think says a lot. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, and it's a cool moment where he's sitting there talking and he drops the mask down.
Yeah.
And they have that moment where it's him talking to him, and he's like, I wish you well. And he's like, see, and Jean Paul's like, you forgive me? He's like, yes, I forgive you. And one day I'll forgive myself. And it was a cool personal moment for Bruce. And it was like, yeah, okay. It was another human side of Bruce Wayne coming out.
Yeah, and I like that human side of him. I do want to note one thing too. I know the writer and the artist of this particular issue became the writer and artist of Azrael.
Oh, okay.
So the same artwork and Denny O'Neil's writing took over into Azrael when that series kicked off. So I don't remember how close to the ending of this that Azrael kicked off, but I thought it was interesting. I never made that connection before, which just seems kind of silly. In the amount of times that I've read this, but I was looking at it and I'm like, wait a minute, this is like the same artwork that's in Azrael when we get down there. I don't remember if the color work was the same. That'd be something I'd have to check. But I know it was Barry Kitson on pencils on Azrael. So, kind of cool. Now, we kick into an issue, and I was wondering earlier if this was going to be in the trade. This Aftermath issue in Robin number 9. One of the things that, Tim has been facing has been, leading up to this in Nightfall, Bruce has been shutting him out. Azrael completely shut him out. Now, Bruce has been talking about this need for change after all this is going to happen. Heavy, deep change after going through Azrael and coming back to this life that he thought that he'd given up. He's saying, I'm tired. I don't quite know what my direction is. Then we see Tim kind of dealing with, what does he mean by all that? What's my identity in this? I put all my work into all this. And it's clear Bruce is upset that he never, was told this by Tim. And, what I think he's bitter and upset that he's back in this life when he was thinking about retiring and moving on. And he has to come to a point where he has to say to himself, where am I going to go from here? Where's Batman go from here? This issue was very, very important.
It was a good ending, and it was one of those, you needed the final closure in the story. And I'm glad they included it, because I got to read it and see it, because throughout the whole process I kept feeling bad for Tim because he was a guy who's constantly, kind of getting the short end of the stick. And here we're seeing, he's like, where's my place in this? Where am I at in this? What's going to happen? And it was a cool Robin issue. It was a cool Batman issue. And it was a cool Batman and Robin issue. And it was a great ending to it, because you do get to see that Bruce does want him around. Bruce does need him. Bruce does value him being there. And he's like, hey, you want the job. It's yours. And I needed to see that cool moment between the two of them, that everything was okay between them, that there wasn't any issue, there wasn't any residual anger or animosity over what Tim did or didn't tell him.
Now, what's interesting is with Ari, his girlfriend, Ariana,
yeah,
he really is, with everything he's been going through, this isn't the time for him to have a confrontation. He knows how exhausted and beat up and tired he is. And Dad's sending him out with $20 saying, hey, go take your girl out. Kind of trying to let his son be a kid. That relationship obviously is going to takes a negative turn because of all this. Did you read those issues? I know you read a lot of Robin. Have you read this?
No, I don't remember. That's the thing. I don't remember reading these issues. But I thought I did, and I don't know.
Because you completed your Robin run, right?
Yeah, I completed my Robin run, so I must have read them, but I don't remember these issues.
Okay.
I don't know what's. It's been a while since I read them, so maybe that's why. And I've read so much stuff after that I confuse stuff, and I confuse where the relationship is.
I like when she's trying to fill him in, though, and say, hey, you made me so mad when you with your secrets and the fact that you ditched out on me, that I went on a date with this other guy. She's trying to come clean with him, and he's sleeping through it.
Yeah.
To the point where the only thing that wakes him up is her slamming the door. Which shows what this life of being out at night on these missions, what it does to them. That this is something that he's not getting enough sleep. And when he is sleeping, it's in places where he shouldn't be sleeping. There's a lot of sacrifice for a kid his age, even though Bruce has been trying to protect him. To, this sacrifice that he's making as Robin is something that has a huge effect over his interpersonal relationships and friendships. Yeah,
and it's we've said often how the life of a hero is tough, but a teenage hero adds to it, because you got your regular everyday teenage problems, your teenage issues, and let's compile it and put some massive responsibility. Let's put some risk and danger. Oh, hey, let's make just your everyday normal existence that much tougher. Good luck.
Now, he's following Bruce's trail to try and help out, and, not sure exactly what that looks like, what Bruce is up to. And I love the tentative nature of everything that he's doing. I want to sneak in. I want to be a part of it. I want to know what's going on. I want to know what my role is. But at the same time, throughout this whole thing, he's talking about how he doesn't want to mess up Batman's play, whatever he's doing, which I thought was a really good sense of his role as a partner for Bruce. That he was being cognizant of that in the midst of the fact that he's being attacked and fighting, and trying to stick and move to the shadows and hopefully be helpful kind of validating his role.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's this ending issue was a cool because it had to show. Well, we saw just Bruce prove to himself and go through and become who he is, and we had those really cool moments with Tim and Dick Grayson fighting, where you see that Tim is a good team dynamic. He is a good team player. Well, now again, we're seeing the Batman-Robin team dynamic. We're seeing that, Tim does know Bruce. He does understand the fighting. He knows when to exactly jump in, and Bruce knows he's got his back. And it was a cool, this layout, how Tim played it cool. He played it back. He was using the radios and just, being Tim, doing the cool Robin stuff that he does and continuing on.
Which is one of the things that I really liked about this, because we see a Tim... you've talked about how much you loved the Freddie Williams run with Robin, and there was art moments where you had these stealth moments within, and I think you can see here, like a younger version of that guy.
Definite.
Yeah, I mean this is
definite. Yeah.
Adam Beechin did the writing on that. I know you were a fan of that run. I was too. I'm not saying that I wasn't, but I remember how much you were talking about it on the show at the time. And this to me is a great example of how a creative team gets to know a character and can utilize what worked for him in the past. It's really clear that Adam or Freddie or both have referenced the history of that character in their work when that happened. And today, we're getting some great references in the current storytelling to this character as well. This history is a part of all this.
Yeah, again, it's the connections of this Robin that we're seeing here, this Tim Drake, is the guy we're seeing present day in Teen Titans. I have that same feelings, that same connection and just that association I have there as I do here.
Again, I love the Tom Grummett Batman. When Batman swoops on in. What's going on here? You hurt? And Batman's already swooping in and doing some fighting. And Tim wakes up during this because he dozed off because of how tired we've seen that he is to see Bruce fighting. He has that moment where where he jumps in and ends up saving Bruce's behind. And he goes, "You left yourself wide open." Bruce turns around and smiles and goes, "No, I didn't. You were there."
Yeah.
But you said you wanted to talk to me. You said there might be some changes. I know I should have let you know about John Paul. Forget it, Robin. You did the right thing. And again, this is another time during this storyline, I'm talking about all three books, where he's recognizing the value of Tim.
Yeah.
The job's still yours if you want it. Now let's get out of Gordon's way. In the epilogue, when these two swing off, we see Gordon's opinion of all this. How can any of us be sure, Renee, after everything that's happened? How can we be sure of anything? Which shows the mental state of Jim Gordon post this, and how that status quo is going to change out of this. And it'll take some time for that to heal. Great story.
Yeah.
I'm glad we had the opportunity to do this on the show. And I really encourage people to read the stuff after this and before it, and to pay attention to DC re-releasing trades in this storyline and in the Batman's future storytelling, and because they're things that are well worth reading. I think there's a progression here of these characters and status quo of these characters that are just really fun to follow. A storyline spinning out of this that I would recommend are obviously Prodigal, Contagion, Legacy, Cataclysm, No Man's Land. You'll get to see all the beats that you want to see, including Ra's al Ghul and Batman encountering each other over this. You will see Bane again. You will see Sarah Essen or Sarah Gordon and Jim, and the resolution to that within all those stories. So there are things that you really are going to want to just kind of gradually seek out and grab those storylines as either they're currently released or being re-released by DC over time. Because those are storylines that I think all should be in print.
Yeah.
Spinning out of this. I'm saying, let me clarify. Prodigal, I don't think, is in print. Because really? I went to InStockTrades.com, I didn't see it there. So I'm wondering if with the re-release of Nightfall they're currently doing, that we're going to see maybe a re-emergence of some of the Batman trades, like Prodigal and Legacy and things like that.
Okay. Well, maybe I have an objective while I'm in Chicago.
Oh yeah, these storylines are, the ones I'm recommending are incredibly well worth seeking out. They're all great storylines because I'm looking at In Stock Trade's site right now just to see if Legacy's there, and I don't think that storyline's, because they've got everything if it's there, and I don't see anything about Batman Legacy there being collected. That was a good storyline because it spun off of Contagion. So you really have to read Contagion first before you read Legacy anyway. And both are storylines that I'd recommend spinning out of this. They occur before Cataclysm and No Man's Land.
Okay.
So if you're looking for a read order to that kind of stuff, that's the order you want to go in. There's nothing wrong with reading them out of order though, because they're pretty contained in their own way. But I don't know, what did you think about all this, Jim? Was this obviously it was a marathon experience for us. Since we've done 300, it was heavy reading for the last few weeks, and rereading and prepping for the show, and then marathon recordings. Honestly, to a level that's, I don't know for you, I think you were a little bit more realistic about it. I was thinking we were going to be able to shrink this in a lot more than we did. I'm not surprised now that I reread the material and the density of it that I'm like, oh, what was I thinking?
Yeah, I knew each one of these episodes were going to be 4-hour pluses, and I tell you, this was an event, going through, and this was a marathon of reading, and I'm glad we did it. I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed reading it. It got me these issues right here got me wanting to read more from this period. I knew the basic stuff that happens, in Contagion and Legacy and Prodigal and No Man's Land. I do know the basic stuff behind it, but I've never actually actively seeked out these stories and saying, I gotta have this, I gotta read this. I'm sitting there done with this going, I gotta read this now. I gotta find this. I gotta get my hands on this. I gotta see what exactly happens, what happens to Gordon's wife, what happens to the doctor. I want to know all this stuff that happens, and so I'm looking forward to finding it. I'm looking forward to the next story that I have to read from this era.
See, one of the things that I think is important about this storyline, this is an example of what you do in a serialized medium. You end a storyline by also giving enough teases, enough status quo changes, enough excitement that makes you go, there's no way I'm dropping. I remember reading at the end of this, because I remember I said at the beginning, I had stepped away from the Bat books for a while because I had to. This was the thing that brought me back in. It brought me in with a vengeance. I went back and got everything that I missed gradually. I mean, that took a while because seeking out back issues was, a difficult venture. You went from comic shop to comic shop and gradually got them. So it was something over time that I rebuilt the ones that I missed. I mean, when I say it was away from the Bat books, a year maybe. So It wasn't like a drastic amount of time. But a lot happened, maybe 2 at the most. Because financially I just can only afford a couple books, so I'd stepped away. And I was reading Legends of the Dark Knight. I just wasn't reading the current continuity stuff. So I think it was 2 years, actually. When I came back, I ended up gradually getting all of those books, and I had a full run again. And just loved every minute after that. There was no stopping after this. This was a period of time where once this hit, I would have dropped gladly anything else to keep following Batman and what was going on by the end of this storyline. I mean, you see how this ends. Like, how can you not? Like, Azrael, like, you're doing what kind of a series? Azrael? Cool. Batman related? I'm in. Sure. Cool. Wow. They could have done Herald, the ongoing, after this. Ace. It's finally time. Ace gets his own story told. I would have bought an Ace series. That's where I was at the end of this. Ooh, cool. Maybe Batman will make a guest appearance.
Just a book where the dog's just barking. Woof,
yeah,
woof,
yeah. I mean, I would.
You have no idea what the dog's saying. He's just like there.
But he would have adventures. Like he would do something. I don't know, like sniff stuff and things like that. And I don't know. I'd read that as an ongoing. The art's pretty good. And I mean, there had to be. I mean, the sad part is there's a certain truth to it. I probably would have picked up an Ace. I'd probably today pick up an Ace the Bat Hound miniseries.
Yeah.
With the right creative team. I would put Art and Franco on that. See, it's funny. I'm taking a joke now and actually saying to myself, wait, there is some truth to this. If you have the right creative team on this one, I actually really would buy Ace the Bat Hounds.
God, I'd pick it up.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's great stuff. But I do think that this was a master class on how you get people excited to continue following a book series.
Yeah, and this was a great way to show how to bring a character back.
Yeah.
They broke Bruce and then they brought him back, and he didn't lose anything. It revigorated and re-excited you and showed you why this is how you want your Batman to be. This is the Batman. This is the cool Batman. This isn't, the fancy, flashy gadgets, the shooting, the batarangs, and the armored, and just what was. Everyone's like, oh, that's going to be neat. Yeah, I want to see as-bats. And no, this is why Batman, Bruce Wayne, is such a cool character.
And why you don't want your Batman to be that violent.
Yeah.
Why you don't want your Batman to cross those lines. The distinction between him and other, and the anti-hero movement that was going on at the time. So, I don't know, it was a good storyline.
Great molecules! They're programming the computers for a chain reaction to blow up that atomic pile!
And our next episode, we are going to be back discussing the New 52. We're going to actually discuss first Dominic Laveau, Voodoo Child #2. We're also going to be discussing the New Dead Guardians #1. That'll finish those 4 Vertigo books, those new releases from the Vertigo line. Besides that, we're obviously going to be having this big discussion of the whole Night of Owls storyline that's going on over in the Batman books. Plus, we're going to be discussing casually any of the other beats and threads and things that we're really interested about that have been going on since we've been exploring Nightfall. After 304, from 305 on, we're going to go back through and just look at the whole New 52. We're going to do special episodes focused on certain title groups. We're going to do episodes where we're going to kind of jump around and talk about books that have been interesting us. We're going to hit every book along the way. But while we're doing that exploration, with big crossovers going on, like Night of the Owls and stuff, obviously we're going to be doing special focused episodes on those things as well. So our hope is by the time the end of summer hits, we will explore, once again, the whole entire New 52, but also giving you coverage over some of the big beats that are going on in some of the special titles as well. So a lot of things to cover over the next few months, but it's all going to be new material from here on out for the next few months, especially after this big, hefty month off of Nightfall. So back to the New 52.
Do you want to rock and roll all night? What about party every day? Well, IDW has you covered with Kiss #1. Written by Chris Ryall and art by friend of the show, Jamal Igle. I got a chance to talk to Jamal at C2E2 about this book, and man, does it sound like it's going to be really fun. 1920 Chicago. 4 ordinary humans are transformed into Kiss and find themselves caught up in a battle of epic proportions that will reverberate across time and space. Plus, with Jamal's art, you know it's going to look good. And if that wasn't enough, our friends at DCBS has you covered, and they're taking care of you with a special 50% off discount. That's right, regular price, $3.99. Yours, $1.99. Check it out. It should be a really rocking time. And, wow, have a good day.
We will see everyone next week then.
Bye!
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you would just call for backup. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman, Hawkman, about Hawkman.